The Inferno saga sees the hellish inhabitants of Limbo attempt to cross over into the human world and remake it in their image as the heroic mutants stand in their way. It is a tale as old as time, of good against evil and the struggle to remain good in the face of overwhelming odds. Who will prevail and who will succumb to the lure of the dark side? Keep watching to see it all. Let's begin! Exterminators number 1, Invasion of the Baby Snatchers, The Dread of Limbo. The story begins as the dread Nastir and his scourge of minions, the Nasteres, are summoned in their grotesque assemblage by the perpetually cigar-smoking demon Sim. Nastir and Sim are both ancient demons who have lived in the in-between world of Limbo for long. Sim, now infected with the techno-organic virus that has transformed him into a being of circuitry, is planning an invasion of Earth and needs Nastir's help in his endeavour. There is a short scuffle between the two demons, fought against the blood-red backdrop of Eldritch Limbo, but Nastir is quickly bested and is ordered by Sim to travel to Earth through the gateway left unlatched by the Darkchild and steal 13 power-filled babies and bring them to the chosen place to perform his dread rite and accomplish his dread purpose. Nastir's grudging surrender to Sim's order seems to hide some ulterior motive, as he quickly silences his talkative lackey Crotus and teleports to a mausoleum in an abandoned cemetery in Queens to begin their invasion of Earth. Bill, the cemetery keeper, is distracted from his horror comic by the lightning flash of the demon horde's arrival. He walks out into the blue fog of the night in an effort to investigate and, unhappily, happens upon Nastir and the Nasteres, gathering like a hive of insects in front of the cemetery mausoleum. Despite his best efforts at escaping, Bill is captured and transmogrified into a mute demon to be a silent guide in their search for 13 infants of power and purity. But Nastir's demon minions are unaware of what infants are, having never seen one during their time in Limbo. Nastir tells them that they will be able to taste their power, and one of them picks up a field mouse and licks it to literally execute his advice. He is summarily insulted by his master. To help his inexperienced minions identify their prey, Nastir describes human infants as small, with large heads, no hair, and round, innocent little eyes. As his words echo into another page, we are introduced to Artie and Leech, two of X Factor's wards, who resemble the description to a T. The Mutant Registration Act has been passed, which mandates that all mutants register their identity and powers with the government, effectively creating a database to help keep them under surveillance. It has complicated matters for all mutants, but especially for the superpowered team of X Factor. One of their rescued mutants, Rusty or Firefist, surrenders to the Navy for having gone AWOL to protest against the injustice of the act. The sudden emergence of his firepower had ended up hurting some bystanders, and he is willing to take responsibility for those actions, but he refuses to register his under the MRA. The X Factor decide to leave Artie and Leech at St. Simon's, a school for children with learning disabilities that accepts mutants, while the teenage wards, Richter, Skids, and Boom Boom, are deposited at the Phillips Academy nearby. The children form a grudging friendship with Takeshi Matsuya, or Taki, a fellow mutant and resident of St. Simon's, but the teenagers form an immediate antagonistic relationship with their classmates. Boom Boom, who can produce energy pellet time bombs that explode in 3 seconds, uses her powers to collapse Iceman's slide upon a few bystanding bullies and destroys their school uniforms so that they don't have to wear them. Oh, and before I continue, just a small request. If you have liked the video thus far, please consider subscribing to us. It may be a small click for you, but it helps us in tremendous ways to keep bringing you these marvelous long reads. And now, let's continue. Taki is a mutant with the power to manipulate matter and create any technology he can think of. Together with Artie and Leech, he tries to make a machine that can measure energy fluctuations in the air, but is zapped by a sudden surge of power. Taki blames Leech as his presence seems to interfere with his inventions, but we discover that it is really the presence of the demons nearby that is causing the mishaps. Unable to sleep that night due to the strange energy in the air, he looks out of his window and discovers a group of Nasteri trying to abduct Artie and Leech. In his attempt to save his friends from these goblins, he transforms his wheelchair into the Goblin Buster, inexplicably discovering his powers in the process. But he is inhibited by Leech's presence, who can sap the power of mutants in his proximity and is knocked out by the demons. The wardens of the school school eventually rescue Taki, but refuse to believe that goblins kidnapped his friends, although one of them points to the two effigies of Artie and Leech left on their bed as classic goblin behaviour. Unable to convince the adults of the truth or reach out to the X Factor, Taki decides to call the big kids at the Phillips Academy, but he is taken to be a prank caller by the student answering the call, who snootily informs him that the dorm phone will be off the hook for the rest of the evening in retaliation to his action. At his wit's end, Taki takes matters into his own hands and transforms his wheelchair into a copter to fly to the school in Exeter, where he rouses the whole place, calling out to Skids. Taki's wheelchair copter hovers outside the girls' dorm as he updates Skids and Boom Boom about the situation, as other students gawk from their windows, and one of them calls the police. The two mutants jump onto a rope ladder extended by Taki. Richter follows suit, and the makeshift vehicle almost crashes to the ground under all their weight, delivering them to the cops, who have arrived in record time. But the whiz kid upgrades his wheelchair into a jet and, using Boom Boom's energy pellets as fuel, wheezes past their grasp on their way to rescue their leader, Rusty, from Portsmouth Naval Prison. They break into the geometric order of the prison with a loud boom, and Taki uses the debris from the wreckage to transform his wheelchair into a tank. Richter, who has the power to cause seismic shakes, destabilizes some approaching guards with an earthquake, while Skids uses her force field powers to deflect bullets from some others. Although the group are daunted by the vast number of cells, Rusty is found comically quickly. Initially bewildered by this sudden invasion, he is brought up to speed regarding Artie and Leech's abduction fast. He disarms some more approaching guards by heating up their guns and hops onto the jet. As they fly off into the night, Rusty laments the negative impact their actions would have on the public perception of mutants, but Skids reminds him that their current priority is locating Artie and Leech and rescuing the two from their goblin abductors. Exterminators number 2, Speed Demon, New York. New York. Demons of leather and bone fly over a sea of headstones into the mausoleum where their lord Nastir has set up residence, his palace of the dead. Sunlight chases his minions to seek shelter, haunches up high and hooves upright as Artie and Leech hang from their clawed hands, peeking out of carry bags. The Nasteri stumble into their master's domain, interrupting his communication with a man called Hodge and earning his ire. He reveals that although he has a powerful spellbook, an erstwhile belonging of the demon lord Belasco, the dense ether of the world makes the performance of magic cumbersome. He needs more time to communicate with his allies in order to manipulate Sim's plan just enough to serve his own ambitions. His irritation with the untimely arrival of his minions turns to blind rage when he realizes that they have misunderstood the meaning of infants and brought him Artie and Leech, who may be human with big innocent eyes, but are patently too big to be the babies he needs for his right. He violently dismisses the claims of power surging through them as his special glasses detect power only in Leech, the green one, and transforms into a serpentine giant thrashing his incompetent attendants about. Leech understands that he is inadvertently inhibiting Artie's power and tries to use that as leverage to bargain for his friend's freedom, but the demons quickly realize that the other's presence blocks Artie's power. As Nastir picks the pink one up to gauge his power with the special glasses, Artie projects their location out to the rescue team on the way, warning them to bring the X Factor along. But before he is able to articulate his thoughts into proper images, he is thrown towards Leech, who interrupts his projection. But this momentary glimpse reveals that the two are being held captive in a cemetery in New York. With this information in hand, Rusty decides that they need to find a phone and call in the big guns, the X Factor team, for their help. A restless Nastir shackles Artie and Leech together to prevent any more projected messages and impatiently commands his minions to find him, the 13 infants of power and purity, hurling his special glasses at them as a threat. He grows impatient with the time that spells take in this world and offers to feed the two mutant children to whichever demon finds a way to do his magic faster. Crotus, his cunning minion, picks up his glasses, determined to win the prize as Nastir establishes communication with someone called the Goblin Queen. Meanwhile, the gang of rescuers, Taki, Skids, Boom Boom, Richter, and Rusty finally find a gas station payphone to call the X-Factor from, but none of them have any money to spare. Richter uses a controlled seismic vibration to extract a single quarter from the soda machine. An unimpressed Boom Boom pours one of her energy pellets into it and leaps away to a safe distance as the machine booms in an explosion of soda and quarters, leaving them more than enough quarters for a call and some snacks. But the phone lines refuse to connect, seeming to laugh at them instead. Flabbergasted, they decide to try and call X-Factor after they reach New York and once again take flight in the wheelchair jet as Taki and Boom Boom passionately debate the health impacts of sugary snacks. From the chaotic collaboration of the young mutant team, we are shifted to the serene home life of an all-American married couple in Montebello, New York. The stockbroker husband and his homemaker wife discuss the loans that have allowed them to buy their luxurious multi-storied mansion and briefly touch upon the Black Monday stock market crash of 1987 that had left many finance workers unemployed. As their discussion turns to the dangers of living in Manhattan, the rising heat of June, and the strange events that seem to be happening in the city, Nastir's minions detect power flowing from their sleeping child and break into their home. The quiet, sprawling peace of their lives is shattered as little Timmy is violently stolen from the couple, the first of the 13 infants of power. Nearby, the rescue team discovers via radio broadcast that they are wanted by the police on account of their escapades at the Phillips Academy and the naval prison at Portsmouth. Unbeknownst to them, Crotus and his gang detect their powerful auras through Nastir's glasses and decide to spy on them. Draped in their pajamas and prison clothes, the team decides that they need to dress better to be less conspicuous and break into a clothing store. Boom Boom, ever the fashionista, makes sure they are clothed in the most dapper of apparels, reflecting their status as the newest mutant superhero team, while the baby-snatching demons look on in wonder. Rusty is conflicted about them stealing clothes, but Taki quickly puts his mind at ease by offering to pay for everything, including the damage caused to the skylight that they entered through from his trust fund. As he enthusiastically explains his affinity for computers, their instantaneous transfer of information, and spelling checker capabilities, Crotus begins to wonder if he would be useful in speeding up Nastir's magic ritual, which uses a lot of spells. The sudden arrival of cops chases away the demon horde while the rescue team escapes on their jet. Exhilarated by their new costumes, they christen themselves the exterminators. We have our title drop, on their way to severely exterminate some evil mutant goblin tail. New York is a musty and crowded mess as they land there, unable to find the X-Force's living ship through the haze over the sea. The city is teeming with traffic and uncollected garbage that seems to grow out of thin air. The heat and vapor leap off the page as the exterminators walk the streets looking for a payphone. When they do find one, Rusty is once again unable to connect with the X-Force as the phone gobbles up the last of their quarters while laughing at him. As he walks away, frustrated and angry, the payphone makes a mocking face at Taki. But when he tries to inform the rest of his team about this development, they laugh it off, blaming it on the sun beating down on his helmet. Meanwhile, the demons abduct another infant and deposit their collection to Nastir. They hope that they will be given the Artie and Leech to feast upon in exchange for this service. But Nastir furiously refuses them any reward until all 13 infants have been collected. Crotus, on the other hand, has abandoned his own squadron. He teams up with another group of demons, offering them Nastir's special glasses in exchange for help in kidnapping Taki. The exterminators discuss how to locate the cemetery they had seen in Artie's vision, skeptically ignoring Taki's claims of goblins. Thus, they are too absorbed in their discussion to see one of the demons flying into an alleyway and do not notice Taki wheeling after it through the standstill New York traffic, upset at being ignored and disbelieved and intent on rescuing his two friends by himself. It is only when he is captured by Crotus and his gang that they are alerted to his absence. A fight ensues, and although Richter is able to dispatch some of the demons with an intense seismic blast, they successfully take Taki away to Nastir's lair. We see the demon lord loom over the diminutive Crotus, irritated by his distraction from the job at hand, as the minion offers Taki and his techno-mutation powers as a means to speed up his spellcasting in exchange for the mutant children to feed upon. Uncanny X-Men, number 239, Vanities, Prologue to Inferno. Off the radar, New York grows stranger still as the heat continues to rise. Telephones eat people, and the radio threatens to sacrifice one of their announcers if donations don't pick up. A family of tourists visiting the Empire State Building are promptly eaten by the elevator as a headphone-toting janitor cleans up the blood to the rhythm of the music. Perhaps it has something to do with the demon invasion currently underway. Somewhere else, at some other time, we find Mr. Sinister seated on his regal throne. He contemplates the ostensible death of his enemies, the X-Men, when he is interrupted by a furious Malice. During a previous fight with the X-Men, the incorporeal supervillain had possessed Lorna Dane, aka Polaris. But she has discovered that she is unable to sever the bond she has formed with the mutant. Something sinister seems to have known would happen. Malice's unbridled rage shatters the rows of monitors in the room in an awesome display of power as she leaps forward with sinister intent. But she is thwarted in her attempt as Sinister easily stops her attack and manipulates her into submission by designating her the most powerful and unique of his team of henchmen, the Marauders. Having thus quelled a possible mutiny, he resumes brooding over his greatest enemies, the X-Men. To him, the X-Men are dead. They died on live TV, stealing from him the opportunity and pleasure of defeating his most powerful foes. He dwells on each of the X-Men, one after another, as we are shown glimpses of their current predicament. Living in hiding somewhere in Australia, we see Dazzler, the superstar mutant with the power to convert sound vibrations into energy beams as she walks into a rowdy bar, bringing its violent chaos to a standstill. She takes the stage and leads the in-house band into a powerful performance, filling the bar with dazzling light and making the crowd go wild with ecstasy. She would sell her soul for this moment, this feeling to last forever. But Sinister never cared much for Dazzler, and he moves on to Scott Summers, or Havoc, Cyclops' baby brother. We see him jogging along a beach, his mind drifting to past memories, his fight with Polaris, once his lover, now overtaken by the mutant Malice, his lethal fight against the alien brood. Scott is morally conflicted by his violent actions and tries to literally run away from his thoughts, eventually collapsing in exhaustion. As his thoughts circle his darker tendencies, he is visited by fellow X-Men Dazzler and Longshot, the genetically engineered individual with the power to influence luck, and by Madeline Pryor, who seems to read his thoughts. Madeline and Cyclops had shared a brief marriage, but the re-arrival of Jean Grey, after her supposed death during the Dark Phoenix saga, had torn him away from his wife and child, eventually leaving her in the custody of the X-Men. We see that Alex and Madeline have grown closer, finding solace in each other's company after being abandoned by their significant others. But Sinister's attention has shifted to Storm, the current leader of the X-Men. Fiddling with the computers in their makeshift hideout, she accidentally discovers that Jean Grey is still alive and shoots out of their base in search of Wolverine. Forecasting her arrival with righteous and wild weather, she sweeps the man off the ground and flings him into the air when he admits that he had sensed Jean Grey's presence a while ago. The scuffle between them ends when Wolverine confesses that he had been afraid and confused when he had picked up Jean Grey's scent after watching her die on the moon. He found no trace of the Phoenix Force in her, which made her both the person they had always known as well as someone fundamentally different. Storm reasons that the only way to resolve the issue is to confront her and demand the truth. Sinister's focus has shifted again, this time to Psylocke, the telepath with telekinetic abilities. As he laments not having taken the time to know her well enough before her apparent death, we meet her in an underground facility caught in a mock battle with Rogue and Colossus. Despite her initial domination over the two, Colossus's quick reflexes and Rogue's brute, angry strength overpowers her, but Rogue habitually overplays her hand and is knocked out by a psionic blast from her. Here, we discover that Rogue is sharing her consciousness with Carol Danvers, the superhero who would eventually take up the mantle of Captain Marvel. Their combined powers make her a formidable fighter. The two of them share a tender discussion about their predicaments, inhabiting alien bodies and leading hidden lives away from the public eye. Mr. Sinister now thinks of Madeline, calling her his pride and joy, the first and in so many ways, the best. Before we are able to wonder what he means, we find ourselves looking at Alex Summers, relaxing to the tune of Devil in a Blue Dress in the summer sun. His dreams wander into simpler times in the company of his erstwhile lover, Lorna Dane, as they dance alongside his brother and his wife. But the bliss is shattered as both Polaris and Cyclops disappear, and he and Madeline are left alone, drawn closer, holding on to each other. Alex's dream is broken, and he wakes to the luminous presence of Madeline before him, looking stunning in a blue dress. She leads him into the darkness of her room, assuaging his guilt and allowing him to give in to his desire. Sinister continues his self-absorbed monologue, wondering if his self-confidence and vanity would ultimately be his undoing, as we discover that Scott and Madeline's infant son, Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, is in his custody, rigged to a machine and fast asleep. Nastir seems to be keeping watch, observing how so many people are trying to take control of such a tiny world. Night has fallen in Australia, and Alex Summers is fast asleep in Madeline's room as she keeps vigilant watch against the window, lamenting her inability to dream. She walks away from him, leaving him with a touch and kiss, and establishes contact with Nastir. The Demon Lord addresses her as the Goblin Queen and informs her that Inferno is underway. But Madeline seems least bothered by the announcement, demanding that he locate the marauders for her to be punished for the misery they have caused. But most importantly, she wants her son found. If Nastir fails in that task, she warns, he will learn the true meaning of Inferno. X Factor number 35, Go to the Orphan Maker. Prologue to the Inferno, the Nightmare Orphanage. The heat is truly coming to a head in New York as inanimate things come to life, swallowing up the living in singular gulps. We find Beast and Iceman of the X Factor fighting a very angry tractor. All the mass communication systems are down, resonating empty static, leaving the two heroes stranded away from their ship and the other members of the team. The celebration following their victory over the hostile tractor is cut short by a scream emanating from another corner of the city. They quickly leap back into action, but this is too big of an issue for them to handle alone, and Iceman suggests that they need to find Scott and Jean to lend them a hand. Their words echo and fade over the orphanage where Scott Summers had lived as a child, and where his own son is being held captive now. Scott and Jean break into the orphanage through the attic as the former narrates bits and pieces of his time spent living there. Contradictory memories seem to be firing up in Scott's mind as he remembers discovering his powers within the orphanage at a time when he was supposed to have been in a coma. Things grow weirder still as they realise that, although the orphanage is filled with people, no one seems to notice their presence. They discover a young girl who can sense their presence beyond whatever hypnotic suggestion is blocking their sense. Jean realises that the girl is a telepath who is scared of being locked up in the cold and dark of the basement in some kind of coffin. As Jean and Scott make their way to the basement, she implores him to dig deeper into his memories of the time spent in the orphanage. Scott and Alex had barely escaped from a plane crash that had killed their parents, but he had been left with brain damage that manifested in splitting headaches. He was provided ruby quartz glasses that seemed to control the pain, but he was inadvertently bullied by the other boys, who would take his glasses and egg him on to look at them, and he would keep his eyes shut, believing that his looks could kill, although his powers hadn't even manifested yet. They continue to dive deeper into the belly of the orphanage, discovering sinister secrets that Scott had not known of during his stay there. They finally breach the innermost sanctum of the place, a huge laboratory where mutant infants are being held in cryogenic coffins. Somehow, Jean is able to feel the presence of Scott's son, Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, and discover his cryopod. As they make plans to free the captive mutants from their strange prison, a new threat appears outside the orphanage. It is Nanny the android and Peter the Orphan Maker, who rescue mutant children from their parents by killing them, thus creating orphans. These children are inducted into their brood of lost boys and girls, a group of hypnotized mutant children who do the nanny's bidding. They crash into the orphanage in an attempt to steal the children imprisoned inside, and are immediately locked in battle with Jean and Scott. Unbeknownst to them, Nastir's demons have also entered the fray, looking for the infants of power their lord is so fervently after. Nanny orders her her lost children to pluck the pods like the ripe berries they are, while Peter engages Cyclops in battle. Jean suspects that the two red-headed children in Nanny's brood, referred together as Shatterbox, might be her niece and nephew. She realizes that Nanny is a low-level telepath, using a chemical enhancement to keep her Salvation Army under control. In order to keep the children out of harm's way, she telekinetically moves the fight out of the basement lab, as Scott attempts to reason with Nanny and the Orphan Maker to stop the fight and join forces in protecting the infants, but they refuse to concede. As a child, Peter had been held in a facility similar to the orphanage. Thus, they are fatally suspicious of any adults seeking to gain custody of mutant children. The battle finally grinds to a halt when Cyclops shrewdly collapses the roof of the building on their adversaries. Meanwhile, the demons have taken advantage of the chaos of their battle and infiltrated the basement nursery. They steal as many mutant infants as they can, taking care to pick up Scott's little boy, as explicitly ordered by their lord. Informed of this development by Jean's niece, Galen, the Nanny and Orphan Maker abandon the fight and leave. While Jean is perturbed by the predicament of her sister's children, she is hounded by the terrified, telepathic screams of Scott's baby boy, being clawed and scratched by the demons carrying him to Nastir. She pulls Scott into their jet, declaring that if they don't save his son, the demons are going to kill him. X Factor number 36. Transformations. The city comes alive. New York is heating up, and previously inanimate objects continue to evince bizarre and antisocial behavior. We chance upon Iceman and the Beast caught in a tussle with a ferociously hungry hot dog stand attempting to eat a kid. Beast is able to put it down, while Iceman freezes a disobedient fire hydrant. Their heroic actions are witnessed by Trish, a reporter and Beast's ex-girlfriend, with whom he shares an awkward and cold conversation that leaves him offended and angry. But there isn't much time to dwell on broken hearts as an anthropomorphized subway train emerges from the underground, gaping hungrily, and swallows Trish and her cameraman before jumping back under the road. Nastir observes all these developments from his hideout in the cemetery mausoleum. He broods on the emerging powers of Madeline and laments his inability to corrupt the souls of Scott Summers and Jean Grey. He instead shifts his attention to Archangel, who has now been changed into the Dark Angel through the corrupting influence of the powerful and evil mutant, Apocalypse. We see him grieving the death of his lover, Candy Southern, at the hands of his nemesis, Cameron Hodge, when Nastir interrupts him. Angel learns that Nastir had influenced Hodge's actions and is incensed into vengeful action when he realizes that the demon is working out of Manhattan, where his friends, the X Factor, reside. Meanwhile, Jean and Scott are speeding towards Manhattan in their jet, as the former is haunted by the psychic fears of Scott's infant son, Christopher Summers, currently caught in the company of demons. As Jean struggles to control the onslaught of telepathic images and fear emanating from the baby, their jet is attacked by a demonic jet plane trying to crash them. Scott shoots it out of the sky, but they come face to face with an eldritch version of the Empire State Building, grown taller against the sky, with bones and horns and flesh jutting out of its sides. They are barely able to swerve out of its way and save themselves a crash. The Beast and Iceman finally infiltrate the demonic subway train, and Iceman takes a moment to quell Trish's fears regarding Beast. As the train barrels along its rails with a belly full of rush hour traffic, he explains that he is still the same Hank McCoy he had always been, despite his changed appearance and cocky banter. The train leaps out of the underground tunnels onto the Manhattan Bridge, and Iceman uses the opportunity to slow it down by frosting up its wheels and derailing it. The derailment draws the ire of the passengers, who refer to the heroes as mutant monsters, but Trish scolds them into submission. Egged on by her support, Beast punches an opening out of the wriggling subway worm and helps the passengers escape just as it jerks free from the ice on its wheels. Iceman creates an ice slide for them to safely escape its moors onto a tour boat, while Beast uses a section of the railing to impale the demonic train. The weight of the tussle begins to snap the cables holding the bridge up as the rail impaling the train bends under its belly. Trish, afraid for Hank's life, climbs up the bolted bars of the bridge and tosses one of the metal wires towards the the third rail, shorting it out. Hank is able to rescue her in the nick of time as the train explodes in a fiery Schracht Arborum. Iceman catches them with another ice slide, safely depositing them on the tour boat. Trish and Hank can barely reconcile their relationship with a kiss when they notice a pentagram forming in the sky. Flying right beneath this star, Scott and Jean's jet is struck by a lightning emanating from it. As they escape the crashing jet, which is swallowed by a demonic helicopter, the pentagon in the sky glows blue, and hordes of leathery, vicious demons begin to invade the city. Tipped off by the fire in the sky and Cyclops' optic blast, Iceman and Beast join the fight. Although they engage with all their might, the situation seems dire and helpless until Dark Angel arrives, slicing through them with his metallic wings. Taking advantage of this moment of distraction, the X-Factor gains the upper hand and defeats the demon horde in a furious display of power, cutting them, freezing them, and blowing them apart. There's a moment of respite as the old friends embrace and catch up. Jean and Scott bring them up to speed about the latter's abducted son, and they set off once again on a mission to rescue him from the clutches of the demon lord Nastir. Uncanny X-Men number 240. Strike the match, the first spark of Inferno. Alex Summers and Madeline Pryor are the dancing showstoppers at the deserted Rainbow Room at Manhattan's Rockefeller Center. Their dancing, drinking, and bantering are interrupted by the loud altercation of the ad hoc paranormal probe investigation team as they argue over claims of the Empire State Building continually growing in stature, which, between you and I, dear watcher, is definitely happening. They are thrown out of the room by the maitre d' and are promptly gobbled up by the elevator under the peeking stare of Madeline Pryor. The romantic evening ends abruptly for the lovebirds as they are teleported back to Australia by Gateway, the aboriginal mutant with the power to create gates between two different points in space. Although Alex seems to be in the mood to prolong their dalliance further, Madeline somberly takes his leave and is discreetly teleported away by Gateway, leaving her lover to wonder where she has gone. We meet her standing before Jean Grey's grave in the cemetery of St. Stephen's Chapel as moments from her and Scott Summers' short-lived conjugal life flash before her. Each glimpse into their happy past fills her with rage, and she destroys Jean's headstone, blaming her for the collapse of her marriage. Her angry actions are seen by Jean's parents, whom she zaps with her power, gleaning away their human forms and transforming them into her demonic pets. Nastir enters the scene and is visibly disconcerted by her display of power and her awareness of his manipulative intentions. Nonetheless, he appears to submit to her will and whisks her away to inform her of some leads regarding her baby. Back in Australia, as Rogue and Dazzler engage in a fight over their love for Longshot, which interrupts Colossus and Psylocke's intimate painting session, Havoc is able to use their in-house computer system to track down the Marauders hiding in abandoned subway tunnels underneath New York. The tunnels used to be the home for an underground society of mutants called the Morlocks, who had been attacked by the Marauders. The group of supervillains are currently shifting base there under the orders of Mr. Sinister. Their work is summarily interrupted by the X-Men, who arrive in the mood to pick a fight. Colossus politely knocks Blockbuster out with a punch, alerting the rest of the Marauders of their presence. Dazzler dazzles Sabretooth and Scalp Hunter unconscious, while Havoc hits Prism with his plasma blast. He uses his crystalline body to refract and amplify it across the underground alley, putting everyone nearby in harm's way. Riptide creates a vacuum around him and sucks in everything around him before releasing them back as shrapnel towards his enemies. But Longshot catches each piece thrown his way, which he returns in full offensive force towards the Marauders. Sinister's mercenaries realize that the mutant superheroes are out for blood, almost as if impelled by some external power. Blockbuster eventually regains consciousness, but is grabbed and eaten by the tunnel walls as they awaken to demonic life under Nastir's ever-spreading spell. The fight continues in brutal order. Psylocke is attacked by Arclight, who uses her super strength to subdue her, but Psylocke psychically makes Scrambler see that Arclight is in danger. He ends up using his power manipulation skills on his teammate and manages to knock themselves out. Polaris, possessed by Malice, uses her magnetic powers to incapacitate Colossus and throw him around like a pinball, but is stopped by Storm, who counteracts her force beams with her winds. Realizing that they are hopelessly outmatched by the heroes, Polaris uses Colossus's metal body as a battering ram to create an opening to the surface. But their escape is halted as they witness the demonic transformation that Manhattan has gone through under Inferno's influence. Elsewhere, we meet Nastir again as he shepherds Madeline and her pet demons, the transmogrified parents of Jean Grey, into an abandoned orphanage. She notices a cryopod and, approaching it, is assaulted by images of herself lying within it, first as a baby and then as an unconscious adult. As she dusts off its surface, she finds her name written on it. Furious with Nastir, thinking that he is playing a trick on her, she threatens to kill him and feed his carcass to her pets unless he explains the truth about the place. At this moment, Mr. Sinister enters the conversation and introduces himself as her father. Exterminators number 3. Guess who's coming to dinner? A star in the sky. Takei has been kidnapped by the demons and the rest of the exterminators are hard at work, trying to locate the cemetery where Nastir has set up shop. They are able to find the mausoleum by consulting aerial maps, but the library soon comes alive all around them and begins to attack. Books fall from high shelves and whiz against them in tornado speed, while tables grow sentient and catch hold of Richter with their clawed legs. They are barely able to escape with the map in custody by using a combination of their powers. Skids uses her force field to protect them from the offending books. Boom Boom uses her time bomb to free Richter from the groping table, and Richter causes a seismic shake that frees the group from under a rubble of books. As they escape into the heat of the city, the statue of the lion, sitting guard outside the building, attempts to maul them. It is thwarted by Rusty, who shoots a bolt of fire at it. They are finally able to catch a break and take a second look at their destination on the aerial map, the mysterious cemetery in Queens. In that deserted cemetery, 2 ill-fated policemen are investigating the disappearance of the groundskeeper, Bill. They walk through the heat and dirt, stepping across dug-up bones, and are suddenly beset by demons rising out of the loose graveside earth. They carry the cops gleefully to Nastir, hoping to be rewarded with mutant meat for their efficient guarding. We find the demon lord in irritable conversation with Crotus. Nastir needs infants of power to open the gateway to Limbo, which would be kept open with the subsequent sacrifice of those same infants. Crotus explains that Takei's technology morphing powers could be used to create special computers that would speed up the process of spellcasting. Although Takei admits that such a machine can be built, he refuses to cooperate. The Demon Lord demonstrates his transmogrifying power on one of the cops, turning him into a demon, and threatens to do the same to Takei, Artie and Leech. Afraid for his friends, he agrees to help Nastir, asking for some kind of technology that he could work with. When he is handed the policeman's guns, he makes a last-ditch effort to challenge the demon by turning them into laser guns. But his plan is thwarted as Nastir transforms the guns into grotesque worm. He squelches them in his claws and explains how Sim has been transformed by the techno-organic virus into a creature of machinery who has forsaken or forgotten the power of magic. While Sim has been able to usurp Limbo from the Darkchild due to his newly gained techno-organic powers, Nastir plans to take over both the Earth and Limbo with his magic. Seeing no choice but to concede to his wishes, Takei agrees to help, but manages to secure the safety of his friends and the babies, hoping that the exterminators will be able to reach them in time. The big kids are indeed on their way to Queens. They leap over the turnstiles and board a subway train, Boom Boom almost getting left behind as she stops to help a passenger being eaten by the token machine. But the subway, like everything else, is possessed and speeds up to ungodly levels. When Skids tries to take control of the vehicle after Rusty knocks out the demonic driver, its walls start to close in on them, and they are forced to escape from the vestibule into the underground tunnels where they are promptly beset by a horde of rats. Meanwhile, Takei has been delaying the creation of the spellcasting computer by continually demanding to be supplied with computer parts, food, and comfortable blankets for the babies. Nastir is finally able to get him to work by feeding the remaining policemen to the Nasteri in front of him. The exterminators escape the rat attack and climb out onto the surface world, where a bunch of bikers try to unwittingly bully them and are quickly beaten into submission. As penance for their actions, the super team borrow their Harleys and reach the Queen Cemetery in no time. The singular demon guarding the mausoleum attacks them in a violent suicide bombing, but Skids' force field protects them from its impact, and they stealthily enter its dark interiors. Takei has finished building the computer, but Nastir is unable to interact with it due to the electromagnetic vibes demons exude. So, with another threat towards his friends and the abducted infants, he forces Taki to work the machine for him. Intuiting that something bad is going on with the computer, the exterminators spring into action. Their surprise attack is almost successful in defeating the present horde when a new batch of demons arrive with the stolen babies from the orphanage, little Nathan Summers among them. They quickly overpower the super team. Holding them hostage, Nastir once again barters their life and safety for Taki's cooperation. He uses the computer to transport them to the most central source of negative energy in Manhattan, Times Square. The demons take flight with the 13 infants, positioning them at the nodes of an inverted pentagram against the sky, and with one push of a button on the computer, power begins to surge through their bodies, opening a portal to Limbo. It is this star that Beast and Iceman notice. It is this portal that emanates the lightning that destroys Cyclops and Jean Grey's jet. It is this Inferno that stops the Marauders and the X-Men in their tracks. The triumphant Nastir proclaims himself the ruler of the Inferno that Manhattan will become as Limbo begins to push through into our world. A guilt-ridden Taki weeps as he realizes he has become an accomplice in the destruction of humanity. New Mutants number 71. Limbo, the last piece of the pentagram. The New Mutants enter Limbo through Ileana Rasputin, aka Magic's teleportation disc, and find it crawling with techno-organic demons. Ileana Rasputin, younger sister to Colossus, grew up in Limbo under the control of a demon called Belasco. She gained her mutant powers of teleportation and was able to become Limbo's ruler, eventually escaping to Earth. She still drew her power from the place and had created a sword from a piece of her soul to keep her control on it intact. However, the techno-organic infection has made the demons immune to her influence. The New Mutants give in to a fight without hesitation. Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, who can fly at jet speeds while covered in invulnerable armor, destroys demons coming to attack them by bursting through them. He helps Mirage, who can make illusions based on other people's fears and wishes, conjure a spear that she uses to impale demons coming towards her. Sunspot, with the power to channel solar energy, beats down some enemies by himself, and Warlock, a member of the Technarch race who has the power to shapeshift into different machines, protects Gossamer and Wolfsbane from the demons, while Wolfsbane is a mutant named Rani Sinclair, who has the power to transform into a wolf-like creature. Gossamer is an alien who has found grudging acceptance within the team. A furious Ileana attacks Sim with her sword and slices him in two, only for him to reform immediately. Protected by the transmode virus, he snatches the sword and tries to decapitate Ileana, but is thwarted by her armor. She realizes that Limbo is dangerous for her friends and, unable to teleport them back to Earth, transports them to Belasco's throne room. In a brief confrontation between Sim and Nastir, it is revealed that it is the latter's magic that is preventing Ileana from summoning a teleporting disc to Earth. In the dark confines of the throne room, surrounded by falling shadows, Ileana narrates the story of being lured to Limbo by Belasco as a 6-year-old. He wanted to use her to bring the evil elder gods he served to rule over Earth. She tells how the X-Men followed her there. Limbo's influence corrupted their souls, and she eventually slaughtered them all to save them from eternal damnation. Her tales shock her teammates into silence. Ileana explains that time becomes fluid in Limbo, with the past and present overlapping, creating alternate timelines. This allowed her to find a way back to an Earth where things remained just the same, while her companions lay dead and skeletal in Limbo's darkness. Before the New Mutants are able to process this information, a horde of Esium's demons invade the throne room, and Ileana quickly teleports them away from their grasp. They reach a place where Colossus's hulking skeleton stands embedded in the wall, and see a young girl being pursued and beaten up by Sim. When Rana tries to save her, Ileana stops her in her tracks. She explains that the last teleportation had not only displaced them in place, but time as well. The little girl in peril is none other than Ileana herself, and she has to be left to her fate to learn the power to control the teleportation discs so that the future may happen as it did. They witness a violent clash between Nastir and Siem, as the former seemingly protects Ileana from being killed by the latter. But before the fight can conclude, the demons appear before them once again. We take a short detour to Earth, now under the infernal power of Limbo, as the Empire State Building continues to grow ever taller. Magneto and members of the Hellfire Club watch helplessly as binoculars gobble up the eyes of tourists and elevators eat their inhabitants, leaving only blood and skeletons. In escaping from Siem's demons, Ileana transports the team of new mutants to a far past where Nastir awaits. He offers her a way to defeat Siem's army and travel back to Earth. Although skeptical of a demon's deal, Ileana is forced to accept his help, having no other choice. He advises her to embrace the darkness inherent in her and seize back control of the sword. When Ileana repeats her doubt over the sincerity of his advice, Nastir claims that he loves her. Although her friends realize that he is manipulating her into doing her bidding, they are unable to stop her from taking his advice. Transported back to Siem and his army, Ileana attacks him with all her might and reclaims her sword. Allowing the corrupting influence of Limbo to flow through her, she becomes the goat-hooved, dragon-tailed dark child, the name that the demons have always referred to her by. She regains the power to command a stepping disc back to Earth, but this acts as the final piece of the pentagram over Times Square, and Limbo invades Earth with all its demons in tow. Exterminators number 4. Finale. 2 to Tango. Nastir has finally succeeded in bringing Limbo to our world. Demons rain down from the inverted pentagram shining against the sky of Manhattan, and the new mutants arrive with them, witnessed by the exterminators as they sit captive under the Demon Lord's spell. Happy with Crotus's work, Nastir hands Artie and Leech over to him to feast upon, but he is thwarted by a furious Taki who attempts to destroy the spellcasting computer he has created. Nastir stops him before he can dismantle it and mocks him for having trusted a demon. Nonetheless, he stays Crotus from eating Artie and Leech, instead tasking him with guarding Taki as he goes to meet and congratulate the Darkchild for inadvertently helping him fulfill his infernal plan, while the imprisoned exterminators helplessly watch on as Ileana furiously confronts Nastir for lying to her. Taki distracts Crotus and obliquely instructs Artie and Leech to unplug the computer. The plan works. The pentagram above Manhattan is blipped out, and the exterminators are freed from their magical prison. A distraught Crotus, afraid of being reprimanded and tortured by Nastir, leaps to plug the computer back in, disregarding the explosive reaction that demons seem to exude from electronic devices. Skids tries to stop him, but is too late. The computer is connected once again, blowing her away in a loud boom. Although Crotus is fried doing it, he successfully reopens the pentagram portal connecting Earth to Limbo, but Nastir, locked in furious combat with Siem, sees the pentagram flicker and orders his demon to charge to the rooftop where the computer has been stationed and protect it. Immediately, a veritable horde descends upon the exterminators and almost overpowers them. Right in the nick of time, reminded by Rusty's suggestion to try and disrupt the pentagram in the sky instead of the computer, Taki puts together a kick-ass multi-cockpit jet. He had been stealthily working on it under Nastir's captivity. It takes shapes around all the team members, and with a little help from Boom Boom's energy pellets, it's off to the races. Unfortunately, Crotus is loyal to a fault, and he leads the demon horde to them, immediately breaking Taki out of the vehicle and stealing him away. Acting on his last piece of advice, the exterminators break their individual cockpits away and start fighting the demons individually to increase speed and maneuverability. Skids makes an attempt to reach the pentagram and rescue one of the babies from it, but is brutally assaulted by a demon. Thankfully, Artie and Leech catch the freed baby. Rusty shoots the demon attacking Skids with a firebolt and manages to catch her, but he is slashed across the back by another demon, rendering him unconscious. Cannonball bursts into the scene in the nick of time and saves Rusty from its clutches. The new mutants, noticing that the exterminators were being harassed by a gaggle of demons, have decided to join the fight. Warlock, transmuted into a plane, carries the rest of the team into battle. Mirage tends to the wounded Skids and and Rusty, while Sunspot and Gossamer wrest back control of Tucky's abandoned plane. Pleasantries and introductions are quickly exchanged, and the two super teams decide to launch a two-pronged attack on their enemies. The New Mutants will save the babies and disrupt the pentagram, while the exterminators will bust Tucky free. As Mirage succinctly puts it, it took both teams to make this mess. Maybe together we can stop it. Down on the ground, Sim and Nastir's squabble continues to grow. Unable to make Tucky obey his commands of his own accord, Nastir casts a spell on him that forces him to do his bidding as he engages in another bout of combat with his rival. Despite being spellbound, Tucky is able to use the computer to rain destruction on the two demons. Frustrated, Nastir begins to crush him in a mound of earth. Fortunately, the exterminators reach the scene of demonic carnage in time, and Richter is able to quake Tucky free. Nastir's power wanes as the pentagram continues to collapse, and Sim gains the upper hand in their battle. With his back against the proverbial wall, Nastir allows Sim to infect him with the transmode virus. Transformed into a being of circuitry and able to mold machinery as well as flesh, he transmutes the computer into a living, organic entity and begins to absorb its power and potential. Horrified by the possibility of a world under the rule of demons, Tucky makes one last effort to foil his plan. He drags himself to the living computer and manipulates the machine back into its non-living state. Caught within these opposing mutations, it explodes in an enormous vahroom, swallowing Nastir in its radius. The pentagram is destroyed as the New Mutants successfully rescue all the babies from its power grid. They all gather around a severely injured Tucky and commend his selfless bravery and quick thinking. Sim is still out there with all the remaining demons, and Ileana is nowhere to be found. But for this moment at least, there is some reason to rejoice. The New Mutants, number 72, Demon Reign, Child of Darkness. Here, we are back to the beginning of the reign of demons, the completion of the pentagram, and the appearance of the New Mutants at the heart of Inferno. We know what happens, but we do not know it all. As Nastir descends from his rooftop station, he is confronted by a furious and distraught Ileana. She has embraced the power of darkness and given in to her dark child persona to take her friends back home, but she has inadvertently brought the whole of Limbo alongside her. Nastir, as demons would, shows no remorse for having manipulated her, and instead rejoices in her new form of red scales and cloven feet. The demons gather around her to proclaim her as their ruler, which angers Sim, who crashes the party to mock her. The situation immediately turns violent as he and Nastir resort to a fight, and the Dark Child is ported away from their midst. The New Mutants, momentarily ignored by both Nastir and Sim, notice the fight between the exterminators and the demon horde taking place in the sky, and surmising that they are trying to disrupt the magic of the pentagram, lift off to join them. Meanwhile, Ileana Darkchild has been teleported to Hell's Kitchen, where she is entertained at an infernal restaurant where humans are ground into pitchers full of coffee, and all the utensils and cutlery goad her to accept the darkness completely and give in to her violent tendencies. As she teleports away again, we catch a splashy glimpse of the New Mutants and exterminators meeting and exchanging pleasantries in the sky, forming the mission plan that will disrupt the pentagram. Ileana is unable to return to Times Square, instead finding herself before a strange pet shop. The animals inside gang up on her and berate her to tears. She smashes their cages, hoping to be rid of their cacophonous mutiny. But they swarm her instead. They urge her to use the sword to silence them once and for all, but Ileana resists, knowing that it is the only way to preserve the light in her soul. She teleports away again, this time to a parlor where its sentient machinery profess their love for her beauty as they swirl her around at dizzying speeds. Above Times Square, the New Mutants continue their attempts to rescue the babies. Cannonball flies through the lines of the pentagram in his invulnerable state, while Mirage conjures some giant economy-sized non-conductive gloves for Warlock so that he can reach the babies without being zapped by the power surging through them. Regardless of the demon horde's continuous interruption, they are able to disrupt the pentagram methodically by picking the mutant infants from its nodes. Nastir's powers wane, and he accepts the compromise of becoming techno-organic through Essium's touch. The events we have already seen play out on the ground, and the explosion induced by Taki spells the apparent end of the Inferno. We meet the two super teams catching their breath for a panel of respite. But there isn't much time to rest. Sim and his demons are still out on the streets, causing chaos, while Ileana is still missing. Skids, Rusty, Mirage, and Gossamer stay behind on account of their wounds and offer to look after the children and the infants as Richter and Boom Boom join the new mutants on their journey to clean up the infernal mess. Their belief that the city has returned to relative normalcy is quickly shattered as they are rushed with a flash of incandescent energy and are brought face to face with a living building. What could have caused this? Turns out the Varum was unable to destroy Nastir. Thanks to the transmode virus, he has merged completely with the spell-casting computer, creating a new demonic form whose every cell is programmed with magic. Just as Ileana slices the unruly parlor chair with her sword to free herself of its clutches, the demon lord reappears before her, commending her for finally giving in to her darker instincts and spilling blood. Blood! Chairs do not bleed! Nastir laughs at her naivety. In his new infernal world, everything bleeds. It had been he who, even while locked in combat with Sim, had been transporting Ileana from one test to another until she succumbed to violence. Coaxed by his incessant sermonizing, she wields her sword and, covering up in her white and shining armor, slashes him in two. But Nastir reforms himself easily. He is mighty pleased by her willingness to indulge her anger and leaves her to stew in it. It is time for him to serve his goblin queen. As Ileana weeps, bemoaning her transformation into a monster, we see Sim's silhouette watching over her mockingly. Uncanny X-Men number 241. Fan the Flames, Sins of the Father. We return to the catacombs of that orphanage in Nebraska where Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, meets Mr. Sinister for the first time as he introduces himself as her father. Infuriated by his claim, she zaps him with a bolt of power and unleashes her transmogrified demon pets upon him. But he refuses to be bested in his sanctum sanctorum and traps her in chains that use her own energies as the source of power to keep her captive. Nastir, the Demon Lord, is nowhere to be seen. Back in New York, it is the X-Men versus the Marauders as the city comes to infernal life all around them. The fight is unrestrained and violent as the X-Men hit to kill, Havoc melting their enemies' weapons, and Storm raising deadly winds that blow everyone away. Around them, postboxes try to eat the men, dropping letters, and fire hydrants hit back at dogs pissing on them. The chaos of the battle is momentarily interrupted by the arrival of demonically transmuted police. But Polaris makes quick work of them by exploding their living metal vehicle and using the shrapnel from its fallout as an offensive against the X-Men. Using this moment of distraction, the Marauder called Vertigo uses her powers of psionic distortion to play with their sense of direction and gravity and disorients them. Longshot quickly subdues her with a lucky throw. Rogue fights with Scalp Hunter, a Marauder with the power to manipulate mechanical components, and ironically puts him down by hitting him with a car. Psylocke attempts to finish all the Marauders with a single telepathic blow, but the psychic screams of the infants still imprisoned in the pentagram distracts her from executing the attack. As the fight continues, we see that it is being observed by a few members of Nastir's demon horde. They decide to feast on whoever is left alive after the battle ends. In Nebraska, Madeline refuses to believe Sinister when he says that she has been created by him, claiming that she was born to normal parents with a normal past. Goaded on to narrate a story from her life, she speaks about watching her friend Annie die from a car crash when she was 10 years old. But before she can finish, Sinister continues the story to its conclusion. He reveals that it is actually Jean Grey's memory of the moment when her powers had first awakened. When she had been able to enter Annie's mind in her last moments and feel her life slip out of her body, Madeline was a replicant made from Jean's template and somehow inherited some of her memories. He explains how his original intention had been to slay Jean's parents and raise her at the orphanage, but Professor Xavier was able to reach her first and used her to set the foundations of the X-Men. Instead, Sinister acquired blood and tissue samples from her and created Madeline. Although her powers refused to awaken through her adolescent and young adulthood, she was suddenly brought to life on the night of Jean's apparent death on the moon, in her dark phoenix form. Knowing the power hidden in her, Sinister orchestrated her meeting with Scott Summers to engineer a genetically powerful mutant baby. While all these plans worked out swimmingly, his marauders failed to eliminate her when abducting her little boy, Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, leading to the predicament they are currently in. Meanwhile, New York grows ever more strange as the X-Men continue fight off the living scenery without a second thought. Only Colossus seems to recognize that not everything is right in the city or his teammates. Havoc no longer holds back his power, using it full blast to kill whoever he hits, while Dazzler grows ever more boastful with every passing moment. He recognizes that some of the enemies that join the fight against them resemble the demons he had met in Limbo. One of them informs him of the shift in power that has taken place there. His baby sister, Ileana, has been dethroned as its ruler by Seem and Nastir, who are planning to bring Limbo to this world. Furious to hear of his sister being hurt, he smashes the demon to bits. This violent outburst is cheered on by Storm, which unsettles Colossus. He understands that the X-Men, like the rest of New York City, have been usurped in an infernal spell that is blinding them to the intensity and immorality of their actions. Correctly presuming that the only way to end it is by saving Ileana, he abandons his teammates to go look for her. The fight with marauders has come to an end, with all of them slain or defeated, except for Polaris. The X-Men gleefully cheer themselves on a job done violently well when they are interrupted by Nastir, who has corrupted Longshot with a bite. He threatens to feast on all their souls, including Madeline's, before disappearing in a flash. We meet him immediately after in Nebraska again, where Madeline has freed herself from Sinister's chains and stands squaring off against her supposed father. Nastir is transformed now, the techno-organic beast with magic programmed across every cell, and he is carrying Scott and Madeline's child, much to the shock and dismay of Sinister. Madeline, with her child in hand, offers to consume the whole world in an infinite inferno. X Factor number 37, A Matter of Honor, Distorted Mirror. Every corner of New York is brimming with heroes fighting the demon threat according to their capacity. The new mutants and exterminators have momentarily managed to subdue the Inferno by disrupting the pentagram. Jean feels it while battling alongside the X Factor and proclaims the demon effect to be receding. But just as the team begins to relax, a surge of demonic power lurches the city back into limbo. Nastir has returned from death, now completely transformed into a techno-organic magical being who has absorbed the computer into himself, being able to process the spells without any hindrance from Earth's thick atmosphere. His demon servants bring him the Goblin Queen's child, and Jean feels the exchange happen. Following her telepathic lead, the X Factor meet the Nastiri in battle, but are quickly swarmed by their overwhelming numbers as Nastir vanishes from sight in his sojourn to deliver the baby to Madeline. As all hope seems lost, the Goblin Queen herself saves them from the swarm, demanding that she herself have the pleasure of destroying them. Infuriated by Cyclops' abandonment, she blasts him continually with surge after surge of power, while he refuses to hurt her with his optic blast. Jean is unable to read any information off her mind, but feels the terrified psychic screams coming from her child. Her invasion of little Nathan's mind makes Madeline angrier still, and she attempts to blast her with a bolt of power. But the demon lord Nastir stands in its way and is disintegrated under its gaze, although not completely destroyed. The Goblin Queen berates him for her betrayal, but he convinces her to stay her anger for a while and wait for the arrival of her mutant allies, the X-Men. But we learn from his thoughts that he wants the battle to continue till the Empire State Building has grown as high as the heavens, and the sacrifice of her child is able to complete the ritual that had been halted by the disruption of the pentagram. He is scared by the surge of her power, which seems to have outgrown his expectations and control. Nonetheless, he is able to successfully manipulate her into following his wish. Meanwhile, the X Factor are under the attack of a deluge of demons born from the transmuted matter of a building. Jean manages to narrow their approach using her psychic powers while the rest of the team tears them to pieces. She observes Madeline from a distance and recognizes their twisted similarities, like gazing into a distorted mirror. Leaving her teammates to deal with the demons, Jean engages her twin in combat, trying to wrest custody of baby Nathan from her. She is attacked by Madeline's demonic pets, whom she recognizes as her parents. When confronted about it, Madeline gives her a hint of her true parentage, stating that unlike Jean's parents of flesh and blood, her ancestry is glass and steel, which has hardened her soul into the cutting edge. The battle around them settles down as the demons are finally defeated, but the Goblin Queen continues to stand tall, holding her weeping baby in her arms. She was created as Sinister's broodmare to help generate a powerful mutant by combining the DNAs from two of the most powerful human beings to exist. Now, she will kill two birds with one stone and destroy her own child as vengeance for Scott's betrayal and foil Sinister's plan of world domination. In his stead, she will take the world for herself, to be ruled under the fiery hazes of Inferno that she herself has willingly accepted. Faced with her unyielding power, the X Factor urge Cyclops to let them battle Madeline without holding back. Otherwise, the child will succumb to her sacrificial whims. A tearful Scott agrees and gives his teammates the go-ahead to try and save his little boy, even if it is at the cost of his erstwhile wife. The X Factor band together to attack her, but Madeline, full of rage and sorrow at being betrayed by everyone she has ever known and loved, blasts them with such immense power that even the whole team together is not able to stand against it. She blasts through Iceman's thick ice shield and mercilessly pummels them into the ground. Despite her heinous and violent actions, we sympathize with her as she angrily proclaims that she was not made for happiness, only for power. The X Factor team seems all but defeated as they lie wounded at the mercy of the Goblin Queen, when she suddenly transforms back into her Madeline prior self. Her angry, vengeful outbursts turn into helpless sobs as she asks Scott why he and his team are trying to take her child away. Before the flabbergasted members are able to react, Jean is grabbed from off-screen by Wolverine's hand, who simply wants to make sure that she is real. The New Mutants, number 73, The Gift, Hellfire. Illyana continues to struggle between the goodness and beauty inherent in her and the darkness that Limbo has bred and fostered. Currently, the darkness is winning. Left at the mercy of Sim, Illyana engages in furious combat with him. She overpowers him and slices and dices him continually, goaded on by the nightmare whisperings in her heart. But Sim continues to regenerate thanks to the effects of the transmode virus. As the fight continues and Darkchild debates whether she should give in to her darker instincts completely to be able to defeat Sim, her friends embark on a journey to find her. Warlock, Cannonball, Sunspot, Wolfsbane, Richter, and Boom Boom fly through an ever-distorting city where buildings keep shifting around and streets loop away from the ground to stand as obstacles in their way. Thankfully, Warlock smashes through it without hesitation, while the rest of the group fight the traffic signals and street lamps coming to life around them. They soon notice Magneto, the erstwhile principal of the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, in conversation with Nastir, bartering the right to rule over the infernal earth. The New Mutants, who were students of the school and held out a sliver of hope to be helped by Magneto, despite his recent alignment with the villainous Hellfire Club, realize that they are on their own in the quest to find Illyana and defeat the demon threat. Down on the street, Colossus continues the search for his sister. He tries to question a demon regarding her whereabouts, but is instead overpowered by a bunch of them and captured as a present for Sim. His arrival interrupts the battle between the demon and the Darkchild, but she regains her vigor to fight quickly when Sim threatens to harm Colossus. The flashes of magic from the battle attracts the attention of the New Mutants, who are concerned by Illyana's continued transformation into the Darkchild and wonder if saving her might put the city in further danger. But Wolfsbane reasons that she had embraced her dark persona in order to save them from being condemned to a life in Limbo, so it is their duty to rescue her from her own violent instincts. So Warlock swoops in from the sky and saves Illyana from the battle, crashing headfirst into a pawn shop. the items in the shop begin to hauntingly serenade the Dark Child. Always been everyone's pawn, shoved here and there, held as collateral for power, even sold herself. Pawn became queen though, queen of darkness. Dark queen, so she, alone on the board, checked at every move, has to play the game to the end. Their chilling narration of her life's tragedy is stopped by Colossus and Sim, finding their way into the shop, locked in a fight. There, the distraught Colossus realizes that the Dark Child is indeed his sister Ileana. Ashamed to be seen by her brother in her current form, she transports herself back to Limbo and is followed by the team of New Mutants. Back there, she is accepted triumphantly by the remaining demons who proclaim her as their rightful ruler. Ignoring the pleas from her friends and teammates, she accepts their invitation to be their ruler again, believing it to be the only way to save Earth from its imminent destruction. And why wouldn't she? This is all she has ever known, being trapped here, discovering her powers, becoming its ruler. To her, the only thing leaving this place ever brought about was suffering for the people she came to love. She takes her seat in front of the scrying mirror, which lets her look at other places and other times, and observes the events unfolding back in Manhattan. She sees the fight between Sim and Colossus. While his brother remains impervious to Nastir's infernal spell and Sim's transmode virus, he is nonetheless overpowered by Sim's minions. Elsewhere, the church where Rusty, Skids, and Mirage have taken refuge with the mutant children and the rescued infants is swarmed by hungry demons who want the babies for themselves to feast upon. They too are quickly overwhelmed by the sheer number of demons as Mirage feels the certainty of death increase through her death glow. Darkchild prepares to take back control of Limbo for herself, hoping to revert Earth's fate by that decision. But Wolfsbane refuses to give up on her yet and finds her way to a pool of teleportation discs to try and save the innocent Ileana, who had first been lured there by Belasco. She reasons that time exists by different rules in Limbo, and protecting the child that Ileana used to be could prevent her from ever becoming the Dark Child. She jumps through a stepping disc at random and, as habit would have it, her friends follow. By some strange twist of fate, they are able to reach the baby Ileana whom Wolfsbane rescues. But when they are brought face to face with the Dark Child again, her wrath is wholly directed at her own child self. She blames herself for surviving despite the hurt and pain that was inflicted on her. She blames herself for building the armor that now protects her, that has led to the inferno that Earth is currently facing. And, in direct contrast to Wolfsbane's motives, she wants to stop it from happening by killing her own child self. She leaps out of her armor and reveals herself as the fire-white Dark Child, furious and glorious in power, and raises her sword in murderous intent. But Wolfbane stands in between, locking the child in protective embrace. She pleads with Ileana to save herself. Might it not save the Earth as well? It gives Ileana pause, this choice between destruction and protection. She transports all of them back to Earth again. It is Times Square, the center of Inferno, but her stepping disc continues to grow. With her as its root, she raises a pillar of light that sucks up the demons who have invaded the city. She hurls her sword across that pillar, into the heart of darkness, becoming a child of pure light instead, refracting out of her skin until she is dissolved in its glow. Sim is wrenched away from his battle with Colossus into the vacuum breath of the pillar, and the same thing happens to the demons at the churchyard as Mirage is freed from her visions of death. Leaving the children and the babies in Gossamer's custody, Mirage, Rusty and Skids run to their friends and find Wolfsbane caressing the empty shell of Ileana's armor as she weeps. Colossus also finds his way there and is devastated to see her little sister obliterated by her effort to save the world. He embraces the armor as Wolfsbane narrates of her transformation into an angel of light and laments the loss of the child Ileana, who was in her arms at one moment and not there anymore the next. But a little voice peeps out from the apparently empty armor, calling to Colossus by his given name, Pyotr Nikolaevich. Heartened to hear his sister's voice, he tears open the metal of the armor and is hugged by Ileana, once again transformed into a little girl. In the metaphor of the page, the little girl was always alive inside the Dark Child who had grown in stature and power during her time in Limbo. What about in real life? Her friends and brother choose not to dwell on the metaphysical implications of the event as Wolfsbane weeps while embracing her close, blessing her with a long and fruitful life ahead. But Nastir is still here, looking over their triumphant cheering. His plan remains in motion, where the Goblin Queen and her child of purity and power will be the conduit through which he will once again build a bridge between Limbo and Earth, ruling over all of it at once. Uncanny X-Men number 242. Burn. Friends close and enemies closer. We return to the X-Men and the X-Factor with a kiss that Wolverine steals from Jean. Madeline Pryor, who was in her Goblin Queen form a moment ago, has transformed back to her human shape and is a damsel in distress, seeking help from the X-Men. To them, the X-Factor are mutant hunters who are attempting to take away her child. Jean doesn't take kindly to being manhandled by Wolverine and blasts him away, although she is unable to deny the underlying attraction that the kiss reignites. But this is not the time to explore such feelings, as Jean feels the strangeness inhabiting all of the X-Men as they reel under the influence of Nastir's spell. When Iceman and Beast attempt to rescue the baby from Madeline's grasp, Alex Summers attacks them with all his might, blaming them of betraying Charles Xavier's dream of helping mutants. Iceman tries to explain that it was Cameron Hodge, their treacherous manager, who had orchestrated that false image for them, but it falls on deaf ears. Wolverine's salacious actions towards Jean infuriates Archangel, and he puts down an attack by him by paralyzing him with his metallic wings. But Rogue attacks him from behind and kisses him in an attempt to absorb his psyche and powers. But she is blindsided by the lingering presence of Apocalypse underneath. Taking advantage of her surprise, Angel breaks away and orders Cyclops to attack Rogue in retaliation. His curt and angry behavior gives pause to Iceman, who finds him just as unrecognizable as the enchanted X-Men they are currently fighting. He tries to freeze everyone in place to allow for a proper dialogue, but Havoc thwarts his attempt and melts the ice block, creating a flash flood. Cyclops tries to save Madeline from drowning, but is berated by her for his absence when she was attacked by the Marauders. As Havoc rears up to attack his brother, Nastir re-enters the scene and attacks both the Summers siblings. Madeline, in turn, unleashes her demon pets on Jean. Knowing them to be her parents, she refuses to hurt them and is forced to succumb to their attacks. Dazzler and Longshot, the most affected by Inferno, see Jean get attacked by Madeline's demon pets but do not pay heed to her need for help. Meanwhile, Nastir conjures a carriage run by fire-breathing horses and rushes it towards Madeline in a ploy to make Cyclops choose whom to save, his wife or his lover. Cyclops chooses to blast the demons off John, while Havoc takes charge of the carriage as it speeds through the streets of New York towards the ever-growing Empire State Building. When they reach it, with Havoc's uniform torn asunder but not a scratch on his flesh, Madeline emerges as the Goblin Queen again. Although Havoc realizes that she is no longer the human being he had fallen in love with and has transformed into something sinister, he nonetheless chooses to go with her, becoming her Goblin Prince. As they enter the Empire State Building, now become a temple of evil, Colossus tries to stop them, but is prevented from following them inside by its gate falling shut like teeth. Undeterred, he begins to scale its outer walls. The fight between the X-Factor and X-Men grows more and more intense. Dazzler and Longshot treat it like a game, bullying Cyclops into saying whatever they want, while Wolverine fights to kill. But Storm remains above it all, contemplating the miraculous return of her friend Jean. Flying around, she catches a glimpse of the Empire State Building's new eldritch expanse and is strangely reminded of her adventures in an alternate world. She wonders why. On the summit that she observes stands the Goblin Queen and her companions. It amplifies her eldritch powers, channeling the essence of all the human souls absorbed into its ever-rising walls. As dawn draws closer, Nastir hurries her to prepare for the spell to link Limbo to Earth once and for all. With a snap of her fingers, the Goblin Queen creates a sacrificial altar on the building's roof, shaped like Nastir's scalped skull. The Demon Lord grows continually more afraid of the Queen's immense power, but hides it well, goading her on to complete the ritual with the sacrifice of her own child. Cocooned in the custody of Madeline's demonic pets, little Christopher reaches out to Jean for help and enrages his mother. Nastir fans the flames of this rage, claiming that the whole of creation is not big enough for both Madeline and Jean to exist, prompting her to demand her head and her soul. The source of Madeline's ire is currently locked in combat with Rogue, but she is swept up in Storm's wind. They come face to face in a moment of tense appraisal until they realize they are indeed the old friends that had known and loved each other, regardless of the deaths and resurrections that have passed in between. They embrace embrace in love and relief. But the moment is cut short by Nasteer's arrival, who has come seeking Jean's head and soul. Neither Storm's wind and lightning nor Jean's telekinesis is able to stay his advance. Angel tries to shoot him down with the paralyzing blades of his wings, but they phase through his body, hitting Storm and Jean instead. Rogue prevents their limp bodies from falling to the ground and, after depositing them to safety, attacks Nasteer in full force. She had faced the Technarch leader Magus, Warlock's father, in a previous battle which gave immunity to the transmode virus. She uses this to her advantage and tries to suck Nasteer's power dry. Meanwhile, Colossus has climbed to the top of the Empire State Building and attempts to intercept Madeline's sacrificial plans, but he is shot out of the altar by Havoc, now completely under the Goblin Queen's enchantment. So much for all the effort spent in climbing it. Seeing Colossus shooting across the sky, Iceman quickly builds ice slides in strategic positions and redirects the Metal Man's momentum towards Nasteer, whom he incapacitates with a ferocious punch. Demons and fey creatures are hurt by the touch of iron, and Nasteer is grievously wounded by Colossus's metal touch. Cursing the Russian mutant's noble soul, he flees the battlefield. The X-Men and X-Factor finally put their differences aside and prepare to face off against the demon threat of Nasteer and the Goblin Queen. Storm orders Psylocke to share the memories of their encounter with the techno-organic Magus with the newcomers, so that they are aware of the dangers of the transmode virus. The X-Factor members quickly learn how the Technarchs are made of living circuitry and are carriers of the techno-organic transmode virus that transforms whoever they touch into similar creatures with the power to absorb the life glow from both organic and technological energy sources. Prepared to face the unique techno-magical threat posed by Nasteer, the mutant superheroes embark on their invasion of the Goblin Queen's skyscraping altar. Standing at the foot of the eldritch Empire State Building, Colossus is lifted into the air by Jean, boosted by Cyclops' optic blast, before finally being propelled by Storm's thunderous winds. He is able to punch through the altar, but is captured by the living walls of the temple. Wolverine quickly joins the fray with a little help from Angel, while Dazzler shoots Colossus free from the acid-spewing walls of the building. Iceman and Storm collaborate to create a low-pressure zone across the building as he freezes it in a block of ice, while she raises the temperature all around it. When the time is just right, Cyclops, Dazzler, and Colossus hit the block of ice with all their might, shattering it to pieces. Freed from the frozen prison, Nasteer is momentarily elated by the superconductivity of his cold circuitry, but the exposure to the blistering heat outside it overloads his synapses, which is exacerbated by a lightning bolt from Storm. We see his thoughts scramble as he begs Storm for mercy until, for the second time within the course of a day, he explodes in an immense boom over the living expanse of the infernal city. This time he seems to be truly gone as our heroes don't find any trace of him, but the city has not changed back to normal, remaining still under the influence of Inferno. The X-Factor and X-Men begin to relapse into their quarrels, discussing the morality of destroying Nasteer when Jean is hurled away by the Goblin Queen. Standing with her nemesis in chains and her lover by her side, Madeline invites the mutant superheroes to the climactic fight of the night. Excalibur number 6, Goblin Knight, Ties That Bind. Across the Atlantic, in the Old Country, we meet Rachel Summers. She is asleep in her bedroom in a lighthouse that serves as the headquarters of the Excalibur superhero team. She is the daughter of Scott Summers and Jean Grey from an alternate dystopian timeline. She shares her mother's powers and a connection with the Phoenix Force and has taken on the moniker Phoenix as her codename. She is haunted by uneasy dreams of her mother, whom she knows to be dead in this timeline, Madeline Pryor, and her baby half-brother, Nathan Summers. The memory of his pain as he is abducted by demons and thrust into a terrifying drama of life and death travels across the ocean and reaches Rachel. She wakes up screaming and flies out of their headquarters in a bolt of lightning, leaving everyone else scared and scattered. The rest of the Excalibur members gather to investigate her sudden absconding. This includes Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler, the German mutant with the power of teleportation, Megan, a mutant with shape-shifting powers, Captain Britain, aka Brian Braddock, a hero with superhuman abilities and the power of flight who was empowered by the mythical Merlin, and Shadowcat, or Kitty Pryde, a mutant and former X-Men member who has the ability to phase through solid matter. Kitty tells her teammates about the psychic connection that Rachel had established with her baby brother and wagers that it was his yell for help that set her off. Kurt quickly gets the team ready to travel across the ocean to New York City and rescue her. By that time, Rachel has reached the city, having taken a detour through outer space, taking a moment to contemplate its serenity and beauty. As she enters Manhattan, she is greeted by a deluge of storm clouds, a blistering heat, and the eldritch Empire State growing ever taller, challenging the primacy of heaven. She is drawn to Madeline Pryor, now the Goblin Queen awaiting the sacrifice of her son, and is immediately struck down by her. Shocked by the similarities between her mother and Madeline, she is too dazed to fight off the demons who push her into the wall of the building. Crawling with demonic humans, the wall starts to engulf her, slowly transforming her into one as well. There is strange pleasure in it, and Rachel finds it hard to resist its lure. The demons hovering around her, jeering her on, do not help, although she is able to use her phoenix powers to break free of its frightful embrace. The disorienting effect of the wall makes it difficult for her to regain control of herself. She tumbles down to the street and crashes into a bridal store. A hand reaches out to help her, and as she goes to take it, she is stopped in her track by whatever she sees. It takes the rest of the Excalibur team quite some time to reach Manhattan. Nightcrawler and Shadowcat are being carried by the Captain and Megan. Since the two mutants are not invulnerable, Captain and Megan are forced to maintain a low speed so as not to hurt them. Upon reaching the city, they are greeted by the Empire State Building towering over everything like Babel. Kurt suggests that the group split up in order to scout the place more effectively. Megan and Nightcrawler decide to survey the Empire State Building, while the Captain and Shadowcat take the grounds. As they fly closer to the building, Megan is touched by the madness of Inferno. She is an empathic mutant who reflects the needs and demands of her surroundings. On their way to Manhattan, the group had taken a bathroom break on a random ship where the leering gaze of the sailors had been reflected in her willingness to be the object of their desires. The same impetus works on her in the city, and she abandons Kurt to the demons and submits herself to Nastir. The Demon Lord eagerly accepts her as a new recruit and carves her into the Goblin Princess. She tries to work the same magic on Kurt, but he is able to escape the grip of the demon horde holding him captive. However, it is all for naught. He is quickly overpowered and cornered against a ledge and is forced to jump off in order to prevent himself from being turned. He falls across countless floors right in front of the bridal store that Rachel had crashed into. Lying paralyzed in pain, he notices her standing inside the broken shop window, dressed in bridal attire, smiling like a mannequin. Somewhere else in the city, Shadowcat and Captain Britain save an old couple from the clutches of a murderous police car when they are confronted by the Goblin Princess. Awestruck by Megan's transformation, the captain fails to notice tentacles of film rising out of a nearby theatre. They grab and swallow him into the belly of the auditorium before Kitty is able to phase him free from their grasp. She follows after him into the building, but as soon as she crosses its threshold, she is transported into the world of an action film set in the deserts of the Middle East. She is transformed into a bandana-wearing, machete-wielding heroine and is confronted by the immense figure of Captain Britain, now dressed as a mercenary, carrying an unreal gun in his right hand and wearing a Freddy Krueger glove on his left. He declares himself to be the champion of the Goblin Queen, joyfully performing his duty of executing Kitty for challenging her authority. Excalibur number 7, Goblin Morn. Unholy unions. Manhattan descends into chaos. Demons abduct people willy-nilly, walls eat people up, and cuddly teddy bears come to life and commit violent murder. Amidst it all walks Crotus, sad and scorned, unappreciated by his master for his exceptional service. He has taken Belasco's spellbook for himself and is venturing out as a freelancing demon. By some grave twist of fate, he is brought face to face with Rachel Summers, now transformed into a mannequin in bridal attire. He recognizes her as the Phoenix and plans his own infernal undertaking by binding her to him. How will he do it? Why? The old Beetlejuice maneuver, of course. He is going to marry her. Meanwhile, a vacuum erupts from within the theatre auditorium that Shadowcat and Captain Britain have been abducted into, and a bunch of pedestrians are pulled into the film. In it, Kitty is the victim, facing off against Fast Buck the hero. Her attempts to talk to the hypnotized captain do not work. as he begins shooting at her for her transgression of challenging the Goblin Princess's authority. Their fight ends with Kitty on top, holding a knife to the captain's throat. For a moment, it seems that the captain has regained his self. Kitty is horrified by the fact that she was ready to kill him without a second thought. But the film changes genre within that moment of doubt, and she is now face to face with a slasher villain wearing Freddy Krueger gloves and a hockey mask with Britain's flag painted on it. In keeping with the aesthetic, Kitty herself has been transformed into a cheerleader. So, keeping the rules of slasher films in mind, she starts running as the killer Captain Britain gives chase. Kurt is still lying in the middle of the road when a living sanitation vehicle happens upon him. Disgusted by the unsanitary habits of the citizens of New York, it grumbles to himself about how the city would be better off under the aegis of machines and swallows Kurt. Inside its belly, he is greeted by a bunch of people who mistake him for a demon and start railing on him. The fight gives the machine a tummy ache, and he hurls all his contents out on the street. As the freed prisoners flee from their strange prison, Kurt is left to wonder whether it is he who is going mad or it is the city. In the Goblin Princess's slasher film, Kitty continues to run for her life, coming across a room full of lockers bearing the names of Xavier's students. Captain Slasher, calling himself the custodian of the school, finds her and slashes her painfully across the back. She runs through a door and is accosted by the hanging, decomposing bodies of her X-Men compatriots who invite her to join them. But the imagery has the opposite effect and pulls her out of the spell the scenario had put her under. So the Goblin Princess transforms her into a golden era leading lady with a golden pompadour dress and a spotlight shining on her. A grand orchestral band starts playing as the captain, now dressed in dapper style, seeks her out for a dance. Under the Goblin Princess's gaze, they begin to twirl round and round until they are well and truly dead tired. Nightcrawler is taking a breather atop an old building, trying to put his thoughts and the events of the night in order, but his logic refuses to come to terms with the magical happenings. He is greeted by a very gentle and articulate gargoyle who helps calm him down, and he swings into action once again. Down on the streets, mannequins are coming alive, proclaiming flesh is life and using humans to replace them. He rescues a woman called Octavia from the clutches of an overeager mannequin and rushes into a toy store seeking shelter. In keeping with the weirdness of the evening, the toy weapons and armors in there have become real as well. The employees of the store take advantage of this and suit up in defense against the mannequin army. The weapons work splendidly, breaking the plastic invaders apart, but they simply put themselves back together any which way and continue to advance towards the humans, looking to take their bodies. Amidst the chaos of battle, Kurt notices a mannequin dressed in Rachel's costume. He realizes that Rachel had already fallen under the mannequin's enchantment when he saw her in the bridal shop earlier. That is why she was wearing a wedding dress and did not offer him any help. He reasons that bringing the mannequin back to her might reverse the effect, but it is easier said than done. Not only does the mannequin refuse to yield to his abduction attempts, the rest of her brethren swarm him, seeking his flesh. He is almost overrun by their horde when the friendly gargoyle offers a helping hand, picking him out of the troubling company. In the meantime, Crotus has gathered himself a zombie priest and initiated his wedding to Rachel, who is still petrified in her mannequin form. As the wedding proceeds, Rachel begins to bleed out of her life force, shriveling into skin and bones. Nightcrawler makes a dramatic entrance at the exact moment when the priest asks the audience to voice any objection to the wedding. Back in the movie theatre, the dance of death orchestrated by the Goblin Princess fails to subdue Shadowcat, leaving the captain breathless instead. Furious with his lackluster performance, the princess enslaves him in chains and transforms the scenario one last time. Now they are in a medieval castle atop a steep mountain. The princess patiently waits for the Inferno to erupt and join the worlds of Limbo and Earth once and for all. But Kitty Pryde makes her appearance again, phasing through the wall, and now she has Ilyana Rasputin's soul sword in her hand. She uses the sword to free Captain Britain of the Goblin Princess's enchantment and stands guard against her. She seems to have the upper hand, changing her into a demonic cat version of herself, but her power dwindles at last as Nastir is destroyed by the X-Men's joint effort. Kitty takes advantage of this and flings the sword at her, freeing Megan from the last vestiges of enchantment. At the same time, Crotus's wedding is hopelessly falling apart. Nightcrawler has knocked the zombie priest out cold and kicks the demon out of his own party. The spell has raised a strange cyclone in the hall, and Nightcrawler and his gargoyle friend throw in the Book of Spells and the enchanted mannequin into it, hoping that it is enough to reverse Rachel's petrification. Thankfully, it is. Rachel reverts to her phoenix form, happy to be rid of the nightmare, but Kurt is left mourning the loss of his gargoyle friend who has been destroyed by the impact of the magic. The people who had been enchanted by the Goblin Princess's cinematic nightmare pour out of the theatre. Inside, Captain Britain consoles a distraught Megan, reassuring her that they were actually working under the infernal enchantment and were not responsible for their wicked actions. But Kitty Pryde knows that there were pieces of them present in their enchanted selves, goading them into action. And she also knows that Ileana, her old friend, is somehow connected to all this. Crotus, having been thwarted in his own plan of earthly domination, tries to return to his master's service. Alas, he doesn't yet know that he has been consumed under the weight of his own hubris. X Factor number 38. Duet, Our Shared Past. Nashtir has been destroyed, but Madeline remains in all her eldritch power, ready to finish the ritual that will forever link Limbo to Earth. With her goblin prince by her side, she is ready to sacrifice her baby boy Nathan to accomplish her mission. Why? It is her vengeance upon the world, upon Scott for abandoning her when she needed him most, upon X Factor for luring him away, and upon John for returning to life and stealing Scott from her, leaving her with nothing. With the help of her faithful demons and the babies they have brought to her, she will focus the power from her firstborn child's sacrifice to become the sole ruler of a demonic Earth. Because Earth has always had its demons, as Nastir had shown when he had first arrived here, transforming the groundskeeper of the cemetery into a minion. Now, Nastir's unwitting masterpiece, the Goblin Queen, unleashes evil into the minds of the mutant superheroes as they start fighting each other instead of her, while her faithful horde of demons swarm them. Storm and Cyclops engage in a furious bout as the former accuses the X Factor of being mutant hunters who betrayed the ideals that Charles Xavier stood for. Cyclops tries to reason with her, but to no avail. After all, the X-Men received news from all over the world through their computers. Videotapes of current events awaited them when they returned from missions. None of them ever showed anything that contradicted the X Factor's reputation as vicious mutant hunters. Caught in Storm's whirlwind, Cyclops urges her to think. Who left the tapes waiting for them? Who controlled the computers? Storm realizes that Madeline had been upgrading the computer system at their home base. She controlled their access to information and poisoned their minds against the X Factor. Infuriated by her betrayal, Storm zaps her with lightning, but it is easily deflected back by the powerful Goblin Queen. As Angel rises to attack her, she offers the star-craving Dazzler and Longshot a chance to take the spotlight. Still under the enchantment of Inferno, their vanity is easily swayed and they attack Angel in tandem, delivering him to Madeline's arms. She embraces him, offering him the power to seek revenge from the world that has continually betrayed him. Her sweet whispers seem to succeed as Angel transforms into a darker form of himself with fanged teeth and blank white eyes, fueled by the negative energy from the battle below, where fellow mutants tear at each other's throats in the pitch darkness of dawn. Madeline's power and rage grow. Storm urges Cyclops to shoot her down with a kill shot, but he refuses to take it. Indeed, even lethal force wouldn't have been enough to take down the Goblin Queen. She orders Havoc to bring her Cyclops heart, and he unthinkingly obeys. Dazzler and Longshot join the fray so as not to be upstaged by him and are engaged in combat by Storm. All seems proverbially lost when, all of a sudden, Angel is able to free himself from Madeline's enchantment and breaks the chains that bound Jean to Madeline. The backlash clears Wolverine's head, who leaps in to save the wounded Angel from being attacked by demons. Rogue and Storm take down Dazzler and Longshot, while the Summers brothers, Havoc and Cyclops, resort to fisticuffs after being unable to hurt each other with their plasma blasts. But Jean has been freed, and she confronts Madeline head-on, urging her not to hurt her own child. It would be unnatural to do so, but as Madeline has learnt, there is very little that is natural about her life and existence. She throws up a force bubble that prevents any of the other mutants from them. She uses little Nathan Summers as a shield against Jean's telekinetic attacks and begins to narrate the tale of her birth. She tells Jean how she had been created out of cells stolen from her body by the despicable Mr. Sinister. Her wrath is directed at her twin, the source and bane of her existence, the template that she was created to emulate and never overcome. For John, the tragedy is of a lost identity, her sense of self, her memory, stolen again and again to fuel the whims of power harbored by evil men. As the rest of the mutants try to break into the force bubble engulfing the two women, Alex stands towering over Cyclops with the intent to destroy him. The poisonous blades of Angel's wings act of their own accord and hit Havoc in the back, paralyzing him momentarily. With the infighting over, everyone shifts their attention towards the tussle that Madeline and Jean are locked in. The Goblin Queen allows Jean to peek into their shared memory of Annie Richardson's untimely death, the incident that had triggered her telepathic powers to blossom. But how does Madeline have that memory? She reasons that she was there with her, hidden in her cells, when the incident took place. But Jean recognizes it as the Phoenix, that inexplicable cosmic force that had replicated her physical form and stolen a portion of her psyche. Its unrestrained power had devastated a planet, and when it had met its physical demise on the moon, the X-Men had interpreted it as the death of Jean Grey herself. It had tried to return to her, but she had rejected it, horrified by its memories of destruction. It was this fragment of the cosmic force carrying Jean's memories and the guilt of unbridled destruction that had found Madeline, her closest genetic match. It had awakened her with Scott's name on her lips, all because Jean refused to accept the tainted memories that it offered to return to her. Can it really be considered Jean's fault? Who would want to accept the guilt of actions borrowed from someone else? Yet, she apologizes, realizing that her rejection of it had paved the way for Madeline's whole existence. But the Goblin Queen has no use for apologies anymore. For her, the only thing that counts is power. To reason her memories of fire and destruction, Sinister had given her the cover of having survived a plane crash. She loved Scott with the love that Phoenix and Jean had shared, and Sinister used it to breed the perfect weapon by mingling the two most powerful mutant genes that Earth has seen, Nathan, Christopher, Charles Summer. Through their connected psyches, Jean remembers the Marauders attacking Madeline and stealing her child, her being rescued by the X-Men, her death on live television, and eventual revival by the goddess Roma. She learns of the pain and hate surging through Madeline's mind that led her to betray the X-Men and pit them against X-Factor, to align with Enastir, to become the Goblin Queen. Jean urges her to reconsider her path of destruction, reaching out with all her compassion, but Madeline is steadfast in her pursuit of vengeance. Meanwhile, the mutants continue to blast the force bubble surrounding the two women, forcing it to expand to its limit so that Cyclops, Dazzler and Havoc can hit it at the right moment and the right place with their blasts and puncture it. Rogue manages to trick the enchanted Dazzler into agreeing to the plan by convincing her that Madeline is upstaging her, but Havoc refuses to betray Madeline. Finally, Wolverine is able to reason with him, pointing out that the Goblin Queen version of Madeline is a demon's twisted conjuring of the real person he loves. Psylocke seeks out Longshot to use his powers of luck to find the best place to hit Madeline's force bubble, but he is afraid of participating. Touched by the Inferno, Longshot feels that his motives have been corrupted, which would affect his powers. But Psylocke asks him to focus on the good they are about to accomplish, the babies they are about to save, and awakens his power again. With him pointing the way, the mutant team finally break down the force barrier. Cornered by the heroes, Madeline tries to kill the baby, but is thwarted by Scott. Realizing that she is all but defeated, the Goblin Queen uses all her might to conjure a blast that would flatten the whole city, sacrificing everyone within it, paving the way for Limbo's entry into this world. It is her death rattle, a fearsome show of power that takes her life with it. But the X-Men work together to dissipate its impact, saving everyone. Still psychically linked to Madeline, Jean follows her into the abyss as she dies. In the innermost recesses of her mind, she meets the fragment of of the Phoenix Force she had once rejected, the fragment that had awakened Madeline and begun this saga of twisted love and vengeance. This time, she accepts the Phoenix into her willingly, ending the Inferno once and for all. The city and its inhabitants return to their normal state, and the Empire State Building shrinks back into its previous immensity of glass and steel. Jun is reunited with her parents, now free of their demonic forms. But not everything changes back. Dazzler and Longshot, touched by the infernal madness, remain in their new costumes, unsettled by the memory of their actions under Nastir's spell. And Havoc's anger at Cyclops for his treatment of Madeline still simmers red hot. But this is not the time for recriminations. Now is the time to seek out Sinister and make him pay for the lives he has destroyed. Uncanny X-Men, number 243, Ashes, a sinister invasion. The heroes take a well-deserved break atop the Empire State Building while surveying the effects of Inferno, but the peace is shattered by a scream from Jean, who doubles down in agony. There's a psychic force field around her preventing anyone from approaching her. So, with the help of the telepathic connection Psylocke had established with the team before their battle with Nastir, the X-Men enter her mind. Inside, they are confronted by the memories of Madeline and Phoenix. They witness the apparent death of Jean Grey on the moon and the happy times that Cyclops and Madeline spent during their courtship. Slipping through these memory shards, they finally reach the center of her mind where Jean's own memories are gathered and come face to face with the Goblin Queen. But it isn't really her, only Jean, attempting to integrate the conflicting psyches of Madeline and the Phoenix within herself. Psylocke tries to invite Rogue into her mind, hoping her experience in absorbing people's psyches would help Jean figure things out for herself, but her exit is blocked by a strange, looming figure of devilish red eyes and an uniform that flowers into a lion's mane at his shoulder. Who else could it be but the villainous Mr. Sinister? He starts crushing every piece of memory before him in an attempt to effectively lobotomize Jean Grey and make her his puppet. Storm's attack goes in vain, and she is trapped by the giant projection of Sinister. He is barely stopped from consuming her essence by an attack from Psylocke, but the X-Men realize that they are hopelessly outmatched inside Jean's mind. The aspect of Madeline inside her continues to antagonize them, reveling in the imminent destruction of her foes. Wolverine points out how, in the absence of the X-Men, her son would grow up in Sinister's shadow, while Storm reasons that the circumstances of her birth do not define her life. Instead, it is the choices that she makes in leading it that truly matter. But Madeline remains adamant in her decision to not help fight Sinister. It is only when Sinister tries to manipulate her by offering her the chance to be reborn as a blank slate inside Jean's body that she finally snaps. Jean, Madeline, and the Phoenix become one and throw Sinister out. Returned to his physical form, Sinister quietly warns the remaining Marauders to prepare for an invasion, because Jun has realized that he is located at Professor Xavier's school and is angry as hell. Sure enough, the X-Men arrive there soon, quite unable to believe that their former home has been turned into a base for the enemy. Jean, Wolverine, Storm, Cyclops, and Angel enter the building through the loft, while Rogue and Psylocke enter the underground hangar. Their senses are alert to any threat that might appear, but only shadows and dust greet them, meeting their righteous anger at Sinister's despicable actions. Meanwhile, Colossus, Havoc, Iceman, and Dazzler are taking the underground tunnels of the Morlocks to reach Xavier's estate when they are attacked by the marauder called Blockbuster. The Inferno has had its effect on him, turning him into a grotesque, demonic monstrosity. Already a near invulnerable mutant with superhuman strength, he has become much stronger, able to knock Colossus out with a single punch and block the most powerful attacks from Dazzler and Iceman. But Havoc casually kills him by exploding his head with his plasma blast, shocking Dazzler with his nonchalance. Back in Xavier's estate, Sabretooth attacks Psylocke, but is quickly overpowered by her. Upstairs, in the mansion, Jean discovers that Sinister has ransacked their entire home to learn everything about them. As the X-Men share their disbelief and anger over this invasion of privacy, Polaris attacks them. Driven by the evil marauder Malice, she tries to use her magnetic powers to rip out Wolverine's adamantium skeleton, but is promptly captured by Storm. The X-Men and X-Factor members gather in the mansion's living room to question Polaris, threatening to sever the mental connection between her and Malice regardless of the consequences. It seems that she is about to surrender to their threats and reveal Sinister's location location when the man makes an explosive entrance and blasts Xavier's mansion into rubble. All our heroes are rendered unconscious by its impact, leaving Sinister free to claim Jean Grey as his prize. He commands Polaris to kill everyone else so that no one is left to stand in his way. But as luck would have it, Longshot is still here, and he will stand in Sinister's way. X Factor number 39. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Longshot's power of luck depends on the nobility of his motives and the purity of his heart. Touched by Inferno's madness, he is unsure how effective his powers will be, yet he stands in Sinister's way, protecting his friends who lie unconscious and helpless, waiting to be murdered by Polaris. Sinister discounts him as a threat, gloating about his doubts over his luck, and hits him with an afterthought of a power bolt. Beast, who had been hiding out of sight, uses his diverted attention to attack him, but alas, Sinister had noted his absence among the ruins of Xavier's mansion and was expecting his appearance. He deftly dodges his attack and knocks him out. Meanwhile, Cyclops regains consciousness and uses his optic blast on Polaris before she can crush Beast with iron girders, but he is unable to use his power on Sinister. His words and voice seem to incapacitate him. Why? Psylocke and Rogue recover from the impact of the blast and launch surreptitious attacks on Sinister, but neither of them are able to match his strength. Psylocke's psychic blast is reflected back to her, and when Rogue tries to absorb Sinister's power and person, he turns the tables on her and takes over her body. Silhouetted in Rogue's body, Cyclops finally recognizes the voice as a presence from his childhood. It was the man who had held him captive in the orphanage, stealing years from him for experimentation. Sinister was the bully from his childhood who had goaded him on to look at him. Paradoxically, it had conditioned Scott to not use his powers when he spoke to him. Sinister had learnt of Cyclops' power when he had first used his optic blast. Falling from the sky after their parents' plane had exploded, Scott had instinctively used his power to protect himself and Alex from a direct impact with the ground. Sinister wanted that power for himself, so he got him transferred to his orphanage and put him under his subliminal control. But Professor Xavier eventually managed to recruit Scott before his experiments were completed. So he created Madeline as a trap and orchestrated the creation of Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, who would surpass both his parents in power. Sinister's gloating monologue outlining his plan is interrupted by Havoc, but his plasma blast proves useless as he easily deflects it. Polaris quickly wraps Havoc up in metal debris and, upon Sinister's orders, begins to slowly crush him to death. His cries of pain awakens Colossus, who lunges forward to help him. However, he is a man made of iron and is putty in Polaris's hands. She twists and distorts his limbs painfully and forces him to smile through it. Amidst this sinister drama, Wolverine wakes up with a pylon through his gut. He crawls painfully over to Storm, shakes her awake and updates her on the situation. With the help of Psylocke, they set up a telepathic link between all the mutants. Only Scott and Jean remain outside this connection. They know that Sinister is impervious to all their powers, as he easily deflects whatever is thrown his way. Then why is he controlling Scott? So that he cannot use his powers on him. Maybe he is vulnerable to something in Scott's optic blast. The heroes realize that their salvation lies in Cyclops overcoming Sinister's mind control. Havoc urges his friends to save Jean and distract Sinister and Polaris as best as possible. He will handle his brother. First, Angel rises out of the debris and lunges towards Sinister and shoots out the neuron-disrupting blades from his wings while berating him for corrupting Scott and emotionally abusing him and Madeline. Sinister quickly neutralizes him, mocking him for trying to use his blades on him. But they were not meant for him and successfully find their target in Polaris, who collapses under their impact. Freed from her magnetic grasp, Colossus attacks Sinister, with Wolverine and Rogue by his side, distracting him enough for Storm to steal Jean away from his clutches. She secures herself within the eye of a hurricane, but even the cyclonic winds are not powerful enough to dissuade Sinister. He advances through its unrelenting force as Storm urges her old friend to wake up. Iceman decides to use the moisture in the air to put Sinister on ice and slow his progress. In the eye of the storm, Jean finally opens her eyes. In the meantime, Wolverine makes quick work of the recovered Sabretooth, while Beast and Cyclops has been bound by Sinister in invisible chains. He kneels powerlessly on the ground when his brother comes, but instead of helping, he gloats over him, calling him Sinister's puppet who is unable to take any action by himself. He shoots him with his plasma blast in an apparent angry outburst, but it surreptitiously charges him like a battery, making him more and more powerful. His deliberate stream of insults begin to get under Cyclops' skin, slowly loosening Sinister's psychic control. Sinister has broken free of his ice cage by now and faces the combined attacks of all the mutants effortlessly. Despite being plagued with doubts, Longshot takes a lucky shot which barely scratches him. Alerted to his presence, Sinister tries to shoot him down from his perch, but hits Jean instead as she rises to protect him. Incapacitated, she falls into his arms. Havoc uses this to his advantage and draws Cyclops' attention to the danger Jean is in. Seeing her in Sinister's clutches again and knowing what he is capable of doing to her, Scott finally overcomes his mind block. His eyes spark blood red in anger. Beast rescues Jean out of Sinister's grasp in the nick of time as a fatally powerful optic blast emanates from Cyclops and obliterates the man completely. The dust settles around our heroes as they stand triumphant after a hellish night. The Inferno has subsided and sinister plans have been thwarted. It is time for the X-Men and X-Factor to go their separate ways. They have different roles to play now, and they will play them well, and their paths will cross as they always do in the days of the future and the past, for they are all the same in Limbo. Cloak and Dagger number 4, Isolation, the Inferno Epilogue, Stray Remains. Nastir has been demolished and Sim has been banished back to Limbo. But where is Crotus, that demon of mischief and cunning who had stolen Belasco's spellbook and attempted to strike out on his own as a freelancer? Well, he is right here in the desert with his collected group of cronies, trying his own luck at establishing an Inferno. Belasco's book says that the spell to connect Limbo and Earth requires the sacrifice of 2 mutants whose souls are locked in black despair. If they can be coerced into taking their own lives, the spell will be stronger, but killing them would work just as well. By magic, the little blue demon locates the 2 souls who would serve his purpose well, Cloak and Dagger. Dagger, or Tandy Brown, is a superhero with the power to throw daggers of light that can heal people, but she has been unable to heal herself since a mishap caused her to lose her vision. Locked in her apartment, Tandy is awoken by the drone of the telephone, and she follows its ring to find her way through her home and answer its call. Her father is on the other side, worried sick. The Inferno has been a strange experience and he is glad to find her unharmed and at home. He informs her that it will be a little while before he can return home. Caught as he is in the infernal New York traffic, Tandy manages to make her way back to her bedroom where someone is waiting for her. He calls out to her and hearing his voice, Tandy thinks it is Cloak, but it is the actually Crotus in disguise. We meet the real Cloak, adrift in the emptiness of space, locked in an air bubble. His real name is Tyrone Ty Johnson. His eponymous cloak acts as a portal to the dark dimension, and he has the power to turn intangible. He had travelled to an alien spaceship on a previous adventure. His return was uncertain, as the aliens did not have enough energy to send him all the way back to Earth, but he was desperate to return to Cloak and had taken his chance. Now he is stuck in space, his bubble slowly losing air. As he laments his inevitable end without getting to meet Cloak for one last time, a couple of demons arrive before him to begin their torment. Back on Earth, Crotus is doing his part to terrify Tandy and drive her to the edge of hopelessness. Pretending to be Cloak, he claims to have never loved her, only being able to feel disgust and pity for a poor blind creature like her. Tandy, who is still struggling with the loss of her sight, is devastated by this proclamation from someone she trusts and loves. Crotus's cronies have taken a similar approach in driving Cloak to despair. They take the form of his parents and his siblings, blaming him for abandoning his family and indirectly causing the death of his sister. Isolated and running out of oxygen, all of this appears to Cloak as a deadly hallucination. On Earth, Crotus tries to dispel Dagger's belief that his appearance is a nightmare by forcing himself upon her, which prompts her to use her powers against him. When Crotus is hurt by her light daggers, she deduces that he cannot be the real Cloak who is healed by her powers. She gives him the slip and runs towards the exit of her apartment, but trips over a side table on the way and gets disoriented. Crotus takes this opportunity to mock her and skip around as she shoots dagger after dagger at him. Cloak continues to be harassed by the 2 demons as they appear, as Dagger, who blames blames him for her blindness and accuses him of abandoning her in her time of need. Cloak is dismayed by the visions and their accusations when his father reappears before him. He urges Cloak to take his own life and end the guilt and suffering once and for all. The image of every person he has ever known begins to dance around his bubble, egging him on to teleport out of it and embrace the airless void of space. Crotus's torment of Dagger continues back in her living room. When the demon steps on a creaky floorboard near her kitchen, she uses the source of the sound to understand where the two of them are positioned inside room. Playing a cat and mouse game with Crotus, shooting daggers his way whenever a slight sound is made, she manages to locate and reel in the telephone through its cord. She tries to call for help, but the telephone doesn't work. The demon has taken precautions with a communication spell, making the device useless. Moved to tears by the unrelenting harassment, Dagger invites Crotus to end it now if you can, and uses all her anger to blast an immense outpouring of light. An enormous white explosion fills her apartment and spills through the windows, disintegrating the demon in its wake. In the airless void of space, Cloak seems to give in to the demand of the visions and agrees to end his life. But he requests that he be allowed to touch the apparitions that are haunting him. He wants to say goodbye to Dagger and Detective Rusty, his friend and secondary love interest, whose forms the demons have taken. Thinking that they have succeeded in breaking his spirit, the demons enter the bubble to grant him his last wish. Taking this opportunity, Cloak opens the gates to the dark dimension and absorbs the demons in his cloak. The repeated use of the word airless void of space had made him suspicious. He figured if he could touch the hallucinations that appeared in the airless void, then they couldn't be figments of his guilty imagination. So he manipulated them into entering his bubble and consumed them, ending the last attempt to bring Limbo down to Earth. Alas, the oxygen in his bubble has been mostly exhausted and he is still lost in space. Thankfully, Sunspot, Mirage, Gossamer, Warlock and Boom Boom are flying through Manhattan, seeking the trail of the demons who have escaped with Belasco's book. They find their way to Dagger's apartment, who recognizes Mirage through her voice and narrates her predicament to the group. She reveals that Cloak is in danger and the two remaining demons are after him. She offered to shoot her daggers directed at Cloak, which they could follow along to reach him quickly. Having convinced the new mutants to go along with her plan, Dagger quickly changes into her superhero costume and they are off to rescue Cloak, travelling on Warlock's back. The issue ends on a cliffhanger as they find an empty air bubble with Cloak's discarded cloak lying inside it. Dagger cries out in despair, believing that he is dead, but between you and me, he has simply teleported into the dark dimension and will be back and fighting crime alongside Dagger in no time. X Factor, Annual Number 4, Inferno Aftermath. After Inferno Blues, the Inferno was yesterday, and it was a veritable nightmare. Demons swarmed the skies, sharks swam the Lincoln Tunnel, mailboxes came alive, elevators ate people up, and there was a giant pentagram in the sky above Times Square. And that was just the beginning of it all. Uncle Sam is worried about the reports coming from Manhattan and the amount of relief funds that needs to be sent their way. So two of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's best agents, Jacob Farber and Elwood McNulty, have been assigned to work with the President's Commission on Superhuman Activities on the Inferno affair. The fact that they look and dress like John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd from the Blues Brothers and share their first names is just a coincidence. They begin their investigation by interrogating a dentist who had been taken hostage by his equipment and tortured through the night, transformed into a walking instrument of oral hygiene and regular professional care. A police officer reports that the sanest guy in the precinct claimed that his car had become a demonic horse and, after giving him a wild ride through Manhattan, had unceremoniously thrown him off. But maybe they can find more information at the 34th precinct, where a few scientists are being held up. They claim to know more about the events than anyone else, so the two agents find their way to the aforementioned precinct and question the members of the ad hoc paranormal probe investigation team, the one and the same who had interrupted Havoc and Madeline's romantic night in the Rainbow Room with loud altercations over whether the Empire State Building was truly growing taller or not. But Agents Farber and McNulty are not supposed to be aware of that. Ironically, the person who had vehemently denied the possibility of a building growing taller yesterday is now convinced of its truth. He shows readings from his machines that seem to corroborate his claim, but to the agents, they are just squiggly lines. The scientist who had been willing to believe in the Empire State's uncharacteristic growth spurt was now a reborn unbeliever who claimed it was all a hallucination. After all, they had been apparently squashed into wallpaper by the elevator when they were leaving the Rainbow Room, and here they were now, all fine and dandy. So the agents leave the police and scientists to their business and find their way to the Daily Bugle's office, where someone might know a little more about the events. J. Jonah Jameson's rowdy temper is mellowed by the presence of the feds, but he isn't able to help the two agents much. As is corroborated by his staff photographer, Lance Bannon, all the film that was shot during the event came out blank. Agents Farber and McNulty take their leave and briefly question syndicated columnist Jacob Conover. His expert contact, Dr. Stephen Sanders, better known to us as Stephen Strange, but we probably shouldn't tell them that, has chalked it up to a mass hallucination. But he suggests that they contact one of the superhero teams of the city, like the Avengers or X Factor, for more information. There have been multiple reports of them being spotted in the thick of things. Trying to contact the Avengers leads them to someone called Jarvis, still a human, not the most advanced AI that the world has ever seen, who points them towards the World Trade Center, where most members of the superhero team are engaged in cleanup duty. The agents reach there and have a brief, unenlightening conversation with a newly christened Avenger called Gilgamesh, or Gigglemess, as Agent McNulty so eloquently interprets the pronunciation. Captain America is currently on bad terms with the government, so they decide not to interview him for their report. They catch a glimpse of Thor flying about, but interviewing and quoting someone who claims to be a god in their official government report also doesn't sound like a sound decision, so they shift their focus to X Factor. The members of the mutant super team are preparing for Madeline Pryor's funeral, and their call is answered by Beast's sentient ship. Informed of the inquest, Cyclops calls a meeting with his teammates, and they decide that it would be best to keep the truth of demons invading New York from the public. Their psyche might just be too fragile to handle the reality of such things. So, when Cyclops returns, the agents call. The story they get involves a hypnotic ray beam in the air that caused mass hallucinations across the city. Agents Farber and McNulty, who are nothing if not thorough, have run out of leads and decide to type up their report. So it ends as it began. The Inferno was yesterday, and it was a terrible nightmare. Conclusion. The Inferno event was the result of a company-wide collaboration at Marvel, but Louise Simonson and Chris Claremont were the primary architects of the storyline, which was produced under the watchful eye of editor Bob Harras. It blends elements of fantasy and horror into a whirlwind narrative where a host of colourful characters come together in unexpected, often weird scenarios and manage to yield success out of it. The narrative catches our attention from the very first image, where we see the Nastir and his demon horde progressing towards us with nasty expressions in their eyes, Exterminators #1, and it doesn't let go. Louise Simonson's effortless writing blends with Chris Claremont's purple prose to weave an atmosphere that feels relatable yet ethereal. It is augmented by the beautiful art on display. From the goofy, almost cartoonish hijinks of the Exterminators to the operatic drama of the X-Men and X Factor team, everything is rendered in beautiful detail. Consider Boom Boom's mischievous, animated actions even in the middle of the diabolical dangers of Inferno as she flees from the soda machine after popping her energy pellets in it, Exterminators #2, or of the psychedelic panels where Jean Grey and Madeline share their memories through psychic connection, and their silhouettes mirror each other like the distorted twins that they are, X Factor #38. Limbo is appropriately depicted as a place of strange light and dark, nowhere more vividly than when the New Mutants first find themselves trapped there, the New Mutants, #71. The stark shadows dancing on them render the doubts and fears of the characters in expressive detail as Ileana narrates her tragic story. The same New Mutants are drawn in whimsical glory as they fly through the infernal Manhattan, as its streets leave the ground and twist around them as obstacles, the New Mutants #73. Crotus is a standout character who provides a lot of dynamic entertainment throughout the run, from his mischievous self vying for his master's attention at first, Exterminators number 1 and number 2, to his betrayed and battered self in the Excalibur issues, number 7, to his final, genuinely terrifying form when he confronts Dagger in her apartment, the mutant misadventures of Cloak and Dagger number 4. Crotus's depiction morphs with time, skillfully expressing his changing moods and power through the varied styles of the different artists rendering him. The narrative has a tendency to drag in parts where characters' inner monologues litter the page and information we already know is repeated ad infinitum, but that is more a drawback of the monthly release schedule and scattered narration format than the story itself. All in all, the Inferno saga provides fans of the X-Men with a fantastically entertaining story and leaves no character untouched by its strange madness.